31st, the top story today is from somebody named Elon Musk. And he has a Twitter account called @ElonMusk. And Elon Musk says he plans to resign as CEO when he finds someone foolish enough to take the job. That could be you, Raul. After which he plans to run the software and server teams. I will resign as CEO as soon as I find someone foolish enough to take the job. After that, I will just run the software and server teams. That's the tweet. And so that's the top story. There's
Yeah. Couldn't we nominate our friend Cal Patel for that position? I think he would fit perfectly there.
There's two daughter articles, one from the Financial Times. It says in a Twitter Space audio room. It's what these are. Twitter Space is this thing where it's a bunch of people get into a room together and they talk just in audio with little round circles of their photos. And when they can talk to each other, almost like they're in a room together. It's kind of like a Zoom call without the videos. It's just an audio chat room, so to speak. It's kind of like, but it's very social. So it's like a social audio club, kind of like a house of social audio. So anyway, Elon was in this room, and he said that he expects Twitter to be okay next year after cost cutting, claiming the company was on course to spend $5 billion in 2023. And I listened, somebody had a recording of this, and I listened to it, and I had a thought as I listened to it. If in fact Twitter, if this was true, and I believe it is, that Twitter was on track to spend $5 billion in 2023, he might have been much better off letting them run into the iceberg before purchasing it. So, for example, we now know, right, that all these companies have had to lay off significant parts of, Facebook had to make big cuts, even Google, Apple's, everyone's cutting back, freezing, all of this, whatever. Twitter, most of all, would have had to make very substantial cuts, which Elon Musk has done. Now, the question is, would Twitter have done that, given their rather borderline extreme-ish socialistic tendencies? I'm grasping for the right words here, but I think you get the gist, which is Twitter had a sort of gravy train, with biscuit wheels kind of mentality of not, laying people off. Wasn't in their ballpark. They've never had to do that really in their history. So and they're philosophically was kind of antithetical to what they're about. They're all about, we're all going to be here and everyone's going to be good, and, there shouldn't be. So would Twitter have made the necessary changes and laid people off like everyone else had to do? Because if they didn't, and the ad market dries up like it has done, and that's why the media companies are also doing the layoffs that they now have to do. If Google had this $5 billion burn rate that they were going through, that could have put them on an incredibly perilous cliff edge to continue into next year. That could have really hurt them quite badly. And what if we could go back and re-roll the tape and run it over again, if Elon had waited this out, knowing what he now knows, Twitter might have really got itself into bad financial shape and then be able to be picked up at a real discount. So that's my thought on that one. The next is George Hotz, aka GeoHot, who joined Twitter on November 18th after Elon Musk's extremely hardcore pledge resigned, saying he could not make any real impact. And this is a coder, a developer named George, who joined for a 6-week stint, as I understand it, to see what he could do. And now he's at the end of that, and now he's parting. I don't know that it's particularly big news, but The Verge is covering it. CNBC, Sam Bankman-Fried agrees voluntarily to be extradited to the U.S., where he faces criminal and civil charges, including conspiracy, fraud, and money laundering. We covered this yesterday, because all of those things I just mentioned are far favorable to the day in the life of somebody in the Bahamian prison system, which is renowned to be, I have from reputable sources, that the Bahamian prison is amongst the worst in the world. And
Great
uh,
weather.
I'm sure the weather isn't yeah, the weather part is probably gravy, but the I know the Bangkok prison system is known to be quite bad. I don't know, the impression I'm getting is that the Bahama one is even much worse. And if that's true, uh, then of course he's going to be, the U.S. is going to give him far better treatment. Even, in terms of the prison system, he'll probably be set up on what they call a country club with a tennis court and that whole jazz as a white collar criminal, almost certainly, given his political connections and the all of the campaign contributions that he gave. He was the biggest campaign contributor to the Democrats last year. So he should, if anyone's going to get special treatment and the white glove treatment from the prison system, it's likely him. So this is probably a very smart move on his part, because his life was in potential real danger in the Bahamian prison system. So
He probably didn't want to really have to work on the chain gangs because that's pretty physical.
New York Times says they have sources that SBF's legal team is discussing a post-extradition deal with the Department of Justice to let him be released on bail. Okay, well, Jesus, it doesn't get more special treatment than that, now does it? He's going to get like a probation of some kind, subject to approval from. How about he just does no jail? How's that for a plea deal? Though, so
These
that's
systems are too complex for any one person to understand what truly happened.
he's gonna have to live forever with a guilty plea hanging over his head. As if that what it takes now when you steal billions of dollars? That all you have to do is plead guilty and then no jail time whatsoever. That would be uh, an abuse of the system, in my mind, if that's how that happened. You're going to encourage other people to do this if you have that light of a punishment. The next is Kuo. Is
I
back.
don't think he's going to get bail. I think he's going to. I think what's going on is basically it's a negotiating ploy. It's like, well, we won't fight extradition if you agree to bail. But the real reason he wants to be extradited to the U.S. is he wants to get out of the hellhole in the Bahamas.
Right.
So I think the U.S. prosecutors know that. So probably the deal will be, we're going to incarcerate you, but maybe we'll put you in a nicer place than the metropolitan, detention facility. They might even put him in Otisville temporarily. That could be a deal, even though usually that's a real prison. That's where Michael Cohn went, but it's like called like a club fed. So we'll put you in something comfortable, but you're going to be in federal detention. I could see that deal, but I can't see him getting bail.
He could probably make house arrest. It's like, oh yeah, like Meng Wanzhou. It's just going to be a 2 year light
Well, he's
home.
asking for a house arrest. I mean, we're only talking about not the punishment. We're talking about until he gets tried, right? Like, I mean, because typically, by the way, very often, until you have a trial, you can get, depending on the offense, you can get out on bail. But I mean, he's probably considered a major flight risk, so they're not going to let him out on bail because they don't even know where the money is. You have billions of dollars disappear. They're not letting him out on bail, so he can run to Argentina or something or whatever. So, I don't think he's going to get bail. I think it's going to come down to, like, where his detention is, and I think it's not going to be home detention with an ankle monitor that you can cut off. It's going to have to be some sort of facility.
No, it'll probably be like what they do in the UK. It'll just be like webcams in your home everywhere. And you'll have probably just security posted there. That might actually be cheaper for an individual like that, given the controversy of the news.
I think they should design a special hell for him and put him in a fraternity house of like athletes or something like that, like a true, his own personal definition of hell, which would be where
But
he
I'm just I'm just wondering why all these people get special treatment. If I did that, trust me, I would be like in a really hardest jail and rot to hell. So to me, it's like all those people who did really similar crimes, well, something financial white collar crimes in 2008, none of them actually paid that much of price for what they did, but regular people actually paid with their lives and financial ruins and things like that, and this is why these things keep on happening. So if you have money and a good lawyer and stuff, you always get away with it, and they call it even white collar crime. And if we are just a regular people, if you and I and others do even like a fraction of what these people do, we would be in hell.
Hey, Messi, and one other thing on that. Even if you're alleged to do something and you cannot afford the bail, the jail that some people sit in, not a prison, the jail is a holding tank. The jail can be very violent for people who cannot. I mean, even if they took a couple of Twinkies and a bracelet or something like that, it can be a holy hell for them, or alleged to have been.
But Matthew, it's not true that no white collar criminals go to jail. They do go to jail. I'm not going to sit here now. It's not worth the time in tech news to. But there's plenty of white collar people who went to jail. I mean, Madoff, by the way, went straight to jail because he turned himself in. You know, um, no. So I mean, people go. I mean, it's just you could sit there and debate the length of time, but I've seen all sorts of corporate crime. Bernie Ebbers from WorldCom went to jail. Skilling went to jail for a while. I think his conviction was ultimately overturned on a technicality from Enron. Ken Lay died before he got to go to jail. I think some of the people from Adelphia went to jail. You look at the big accounting fraud, Send It, those people went to jail. This is where it is. So yeah, they go to jail. You could just debate the time, but yeah.
But Ken, that's true, but that is actually the rarity. If you look at the 2008, even that young guy, I forgot his name, who was in Congress and talked about even like embezzling billions, they didn't go to jail. Even Goldman Sachs CEO, he was sitting there and he was saying that it's almost someone was saying it's time to benefit from what we did. That to me is
Well,
even
yeah,
a
because it wasn't clear, quite frankly. I don't want to get. It really wasn't clear that those are. Some of the issues with white collar crimes are proving what's actually a crime, because basically you have a lot of legitimate financial transactions, and depending on how they're done, some of them might be fraudulent. Okay, maybe you misled somebody or whatever. I mean, the stuff with the 2008 is much harder to actually call a legal crime. And I would just end with this: 2008 and the debacle was a collective problem with society. Okay, so when you talk about Goldman did this did that, everybody bought into the frenzy. Okay, including everybody who wanted a home, whether they could afford it or not. Okay, everybody bought into the frenzy. So there's a there's a real collective guilt there. There was a federal policy coming from Congress to basically let people buy stuff with like 3% down, nothing down. It was there's a societal collective guilt to what happened in 2008, and so it's a very different situation.
Yes, I agree with you, but what I'm trying to say is when you do have that type of general crime, some group do pay one way or the other. So if the people did actually buy houses that they couldn't afford or anything, most of them actually got into financial ruins and things like that. And then the other white collar that we call them actually benefited, most of them, except Lehman Brothers went under, but most of them actually got cuddled and saved, and others not only most of them didn't go to jail, they actually benefited from it. So I'm just trying to say that we do have a system that actually disproportionately punishes some part of the society and actually does nothing or even cuddle the other part of the society. I was just this morning, I was listening to the news and saw that the taxes from Trump, he paid zero. Can you imagine that? They chase me like to pay taxes even when I'm in Ethiopia or anything like that. I can imagine.
Let's use that as an example. I believe he actually probably legally, even not legally, he cheated on his taxes. He's probably guilty of tax fraud in his case. But there was something that he said when he was running for president that's also true. A lot of the taxes he didn't pay, okay, were legal deductions. And his point was Hillary Clinton, among other people, voted for these things. And he actually said that during the debate. He says, you know why I don't pay taxes? Because I've got depreciation expense that everybody in Congress votes for. So I mean, the problem, and what we get to really, I think where you're getting messy, what's legal isn't always ethical, and what's ethical isn't always legal, and that's usually the issue with white collar. Okay, you have a lot of things that quite frankly are distasteful, but they're legal, but they're really not ethical. And so I'll just leave it at that.
Messi, one thing that I also noticed is the ability to bounce back. And when these guys come through this, and you can, whether it's Barbarians of the Gate from 80s, night, all the different economic issues, you name it, some of the people may be shamed, but something about their crime, even if convicted, the ability to bounce back and be rehired by their buddies, even if they lose their law licenses or things like that, they usually bounce back pretty well. And it's shamefully, I've even seen academia, higher ed, hire some of these effers and have them come in to speak. So it just blows my mind.
It is very that's exactly my whole point. We are talking about what is his name, Sam, or he was able to go to the Bahamas and other tax havens and loopholes to benefit and make all this money or fraud. But now we're gonna cuddle him and bring him in so that he can have a lighter or a better prison system. Do you think I would get that or any other normal person could get that? That's all I was trying to say. Even when you find them that they have done some crime, that they don't get punished like anybody else. That's all I was trying to say.
Yeah, special treatment for special people.
Exactly. You should just have money. It doesn't matter even if you do crime.
Okay, moving on. Kuo, the famed Apple leaker, it says Apple plans to cancel or postpone the iPhone SE 4 mass production set for 2024 due to lower than expected shipments of its middle and lower tier phones. Well, yeah, we're going into a recession. This makes perfect sense. SEC deposition, Mark Zuckerberg considered disclosing in 2017 that Facebook was investigating organizations like Cambridge Analytica, but advisors said not to. Zuckerberg testified in U.S. federal court about Meta's acquisition of Within as the FTC seeks an injunction to stop the deal in a highly unusual challenge. I don't even remember Within. What is Within? The Meta's chief executive made a rare court appearance as the FTC tries to block his company's purchase of a virtual reality startup called Within. Seems a little excessive at this point. Wall Street Journal says they have sources that the NFL is in advanced talks to give YouTube exclusive Sunday night or Sunday ticket rights. A deal could be reached as early as December 21 after an NFL owner meeting. That's today. So is YouTube going to be exclusive for NFL Sunday
So
ticket rights?
what it is it's called NFL Sunday Ticket. The rights are now held by DirecTV. Up until this announcement, I think the speculation was that Apple TV would be the front runner for this, even though it was known that Google/YouTube was in the running. And so, yeah, I mean they're gonna get the rights. That DirecTV is not even bidding again because they've got their own financial problems with massive losses of subscribers and satellite. Um, and I've been talking about YouTube, the TV aspect for a long time in this room, and I said,
Yep.
they're actually right now the number one was called virtual MPVD, like it's a industry lingo for multiple channel
Virtual,
video distributor, but like on a
video,
virtual basis, not through your
virtual.
cable or satellite. And they've got like 4 or 5 million subs, and they keep growing. People, are going to them as opposed to having cable and satellite. So this makes a lot of sense for them.
Mhm.
And they're a very big player in what people generally, macro sense consider television. Okay, even before this. So, and a lot of people don't think of YouTube as that. They think of YouTube as the, making videos and McBeast and our new young friend on stage. And they don't, realize that, YouTube's got this big platform on YouTube TV where if you want to watch, CNN, or you want to watch TNT, or traditional, linear cable channels, people are getting them through YouTube Television, which is a subscription service. Um, and so this just plays into that, yeah. And this basically gives you access to pretty much every football game on Sunday. I forgot what if there's blackout rules on it, but you pretty much get like every game. Yeah.
Ken, do you believe that if Apple were to bid, I don't know what not significant is, but let's just say higher than Google, but not by a lot, is Google still favored over Apple, in your opinion?
I really don't have an opinion on that. I will tell you this. Um, the last time the transaction, I think Google bid the last time, and the NFL actually took an inferior deal with DirecTV only because they had a long relationship with DirecTV. So the answer is I don't know. I actually think Google has more of a presence in what we call connected television. Might be I guess the new industry lingo, which basically means you've got a box in your house. No matter how you get it, cable, satellite, or through the internet. So they're a big player, the much bigger player in connected television than Apple TV is at this point. So you know if Apple would tremendously overbid, I guess they would go with Apple. But I think Apple's also probably being judicious in what they bid, and probably Google or YouTube probably is in a position to bid more because I think there's more synergies for them. Then because then I mean, Apple only has a streaming service. Apple has a streaming service like Netflix that's a fraction of the size of Netflix. YouTube has a service that basically, if they never showed a movie, okay, has 4 or 5 million subscribers. Basically, just giving you feeds of all the stuff that you traditionally would get on television or cable TV.
Thank you.
Okay, moving right along. The next one is US based crypto miner called Core Scientific files for bankruptcy in Texas, estimating its liabilities and assets between $1 and $10 billion and creditors between 1,000 and 1,000 and 5,000 creditors. The publicly traded miner expects support from some of the holders of its convertible notes in a restructuring deal. Internal documents from The Intercept from at least 2017, maybe sooner, earlier. Twitter helped the Pentagon in its covert online foreign propaganda campaigns, including by whitelisting CENTCOM accounts. Twitter executives have claimed for years that the company makes concerted efforts to detect and thwart government-backed covert propaganda campaigns on its platform, and according to internal documents seen by The Intercept, that Twitter has been helping the Pentagon with covert online foreign propaganda campaigns since at least 2017. Next up, Elon Musk amplifies false claims that the FBI paid Twitter millions to censor info from the public. Law enforcement reimbursement company Law enforcement reimburses companies for data requests.
Well, that definitely plays into the Q and QAnon stuff. So
Yeah.
A lot of conflicting descriptions of Twitter.
Well, any way you slice it, Twitter lied to folks about both of those two articles. Make it clear that, by the way, everything that we've been saying in this room for a year plus about what the intelligence agencies do everywhere in every country is now now understood to act. We were not conspiracy theorists at all. We were correct. This shit is happening.
But Tyler, there is a long history, even in the United States, okay,
Yeah,
of
I'm not saying there. I'm not
of
saying there's
media
not.
of media outlets cooperating with the government when they believe that we're all in it together. It's for Americans, and you can go particularly during when we're at war. I mean, there was tremendous cooperation from the media in World War II. I mean, obviously, Vietnam broke a lot of those bonds. But historically. The media, if they think that there's a legitimate national interest, and probably keeping the Russians from influencing our elections was considered a legitimate national interest, tends to be, cooperative. I remember during the first Gulf War, when we were first moving troops over there, right? The media didn't report the troop movements, even though they knew about them because it was a risk to the troops. So they basically kept the lid on it. I mean, they kept the lid on information they had at the request of the government because it would put our troops in danger. So this is not unusual. Okay, I mean, take it in that context.
Yeah, or you could go back to William Randolph Hearst, and you know, the there's a very rich history in the way that you're describing it. The difference is the kind of how with social media, in the age of social media, it gets personalized, where you're getting people's, it gets down to individual users in a way that traditional media doesn't touch, because it's just a much broader form of media. Um,
Yeah, it
By
was
the way,
almost 2 years
I kind of
ago.
know where you're getting. Did you skip like the Apple SE phone news? I mean,
no,
because did
we
you?
didn't.
Or no?
No,
You didn't get to it yet.
we read it.
Oh, you read it already? Okay, I missed it. Okay.
So, someone mentioned QAnon, and I remember about a year and a half, 2 years ago, I guess even longer, when I noticed that this narrative was gaining traction. I kind of actually talked to my friends and noticed that it was gaining traction a lot faster than other conspiracy theories. And the amount of reach that it had was quite incredible. So then there were people that I heard of that were actually looking into this. And so I then started looking into a lot of just the different geopolitical tensions as best I could, and told my friends to start brushing up on the Cold War history. Um, I think it was the spring before um, Putin actually invaded. And I kind of didn't think that that Ukraine area was going to escalate as fast as perhaps Taiwan. But I told them to watch what they're reading and paying attention to um, a long time ago, and they've since thanked me. It is something to look into about Cold War history and media and propaganda and subversion. And if anyone's just going to blame their own government, that would be a disservice to their own society. This sort of thing has happened quite a bit from all governments of power, and something to pay attention to is just like brushing up on that Cold War history and how the media impacted the minds of the citizens.
Okay. Next up, Okta tells customers its GitHub repositories were hacked this month and its source code was stolen, but says hackers did not access service or customer data. So Okta, the leading provider of authentication services and identity and access management solutions, says its private GitHub was hacked. Okay, Donnie O'Sullivan, Drew Harwell, and other journalists remain locked out of their Twitter accounts despite lifted suspensions until they delete a specific tweet. Yes, well, that's the whole.
Could you just go back to the Octa thing for a second?
Sure.
So, what was stolen? Was it that was of any value? I mean, and that's what I'm not clear about. I mean, I know exactly what Octa does and what Octa is, but but what was stolen? That would be of consequence to its clients. Then
I don't know.
you don't know. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, if
The
you have the source, you mean the source code stealing or access?
yes.
Is that
Source
what you're?
code.
Yeah,
Source
I mean
code.
that's a significant security risk if you design something on the basis that it's closed source. Unless all your developers are completely on their game, it's very easy to have significant security vectors exposed by having
Right.
being able to see
So
for a
a lot of
start
Fortune
as a minimum.
500 companies use Okta. So in order to like verify that when people go on their corporate websites that they're employees or whatever. So you're saying all of that security can be compromised by this, right?
Not necessarily that it can, but that it increases the chances. Because, for example, if a developer doesn't put secure information in environment variables, they've hard coded it in, usernames, passwords, all sorts of bad practices happen out there. That could be in the source code. It also tells people exactly how this service works, warts and all. There could be a whole bunch of warts in the way that it works. There could be things they're doing in there they shouldn't be doing. They might be screen scraping where they shouldn't be against people's user policies. And there's all sorts of things you can imagine that would go wrong. But basically, if you've design something on the basis you didn't think the world was looking, and suddenly they are, you've got to really, and this is
Got
where
it. I understand now.
integrity, this
Okay.
is where integrity comes out, and professionalism. If you have utmost integrity and professionalism, it wouldn't matter. You go, so what? But the reality is that that could cause all sorts of problems across the map.
So why put it on GitHub?
Well, exactly. I mean, you could choose something else, but you can put it on GitHub with believing that it's private, right?
That's
So
a good question. Why would they put it? Why they would put it on GitHub? They shouldn't. That was a big mistake on their part, and I think that's where the
Especially if you're
embarrassment
a
part is.
security company and confidential computing is there, you could use that.
Okay.
This kind
So
of a hack, you won't see it for a couple months as the hackers review the source code to see if they can find vulnerabilities.
okay, moving on. So you remember way back in the 10 dramas ago, 10 Twitter dramas ago, when some journalists were suspended for writing about and linking to the Elon Jet story, which included a link about Elon's precise GPS coordinate locations of his airplane. So now this story from The Intercept says that these journalists um, remain locked out of their Twitter accounts despite lifted suspensions until they delete a specific tweet. And what this means is they were they know, and they should know because I know that the condition of them being suspended, because they said, "Oh, we got suspended for nothing. We did nothing wrong." No, no, no. You were told specifically, very precisely, why you of all people were suspended because you tweeted to a story that contained a link to the location of Elon, which makes it very easy for people to stalk him. And that was why your account got suspended. Now, in being suspended, it says how to resolve your suspension is to delete this tweet because we're hiding your account so that people cannot see the tweet that you did. But if you delete the tweet, then we reactivate the account or whatever. Now, the suspension, quote unquote, has been lifted. So their accounts are back, minus the tweet, obviously, that Elon doesn't want people to see because it links to the Elon Jet link that allows people to see the coordinates. So they're saying the accounts back up when people look for my account. It's there. It shows that I'm there. It looks like I'm using Twitter. However, I'm locked out of my account until I delete the tweet. Yes, exactly. And this will probably be the policy going forward. When people make a tweet that violates some policy, rather than making the account look like they've been disappeared, leave the account as normal, minus the offensive or offending tweet. Let them know you're locked out of your account, and when you log in your account, you can reactivate your account by deleting this tweet. So it's a minimal infringement on your site, so people can still send you DMs. You might even still be able to get them. Just make it as light as possible for them, and as light as possible for them to, uh, you know, get their account active, get back into their account again. Their account can be active, minus people can still like their tweets. People can retweet their old tweets. People can search and find their old tweets and everything else. But you're not going to be able to do any tweeting yourself. That's the other thing you could do. You could make the account active. They could DM. Just don't let them tweet anymore until they delete the offending tweet. You could do that too. Then they could like stuff, retweet stuff, do all kinds of stuff. They just won't be able to tweet until they remove the previous tweet. And if they do a new tweet, of course, it'll be put in a pending queue to make sure that they're not, anyway. So there's all kinds of ways of policing these things, but the way that the journalists are crafting these stories is they're taking a bit of poetic license with interpreting what's
Hey,
really going on.
Tyler,
Yeah.
are they evenly enforcing this across every infringement of their terms of service? And also the tweets about Elon's jet, that stuff's all open source information. He's mad because they're posting something about his jet, but I mean, you can get that anywhere, right? You can get that off of all those like
Can you get it
open
for me?
sites.
Can you get it for me?
I'm not going to go look at it right now, but yeah, you can get it.
I'm going to bet you
Whichever
money
site
you
they're linking you
can't.
to. Oh,
Bet you
yes, you
money you
can.
can't.
Open source, yes, you
I'll
can.
give you
Tyler,
30
you actually,
minutes. How's this? How about a
yeah, you
$1,000
definitely
bet
can.
for 30 minutes?
Ever heard
I'm
of
not going to
Flight
go look it
Radar
up, but
24?
How about
yeah,
you research shit before you open your mouth?
I absolutely.
Well, then take the bet.
I think I'm not going to go. It's not worth my time, Tyler. It's
No, it's
not.
because you don't
Again,
have the right
Elon's being a big
information.
baby about this. Yeah, he's being a
No
big baby about
babiness.
this.
No,
You
I just
think he's
exposed
equally
that you
more?
don't know what you're talking about.
Oh, Tyler, please.
Prove me wrong.
Flight Radar
Got
24?
$2,000 an hour is probably got to be worth it. Minimum $2,000 an hour because you only got a half-hour deadline.
It's not worth it for her.
Well, this is kind of like the magic of programming, isn't it? And I think that's the point to take away is that these entitled reporters that wanted to so readily give out a person's location, that he wasn't even there, and it was someone in his family that he was concerned about. There was very little lack of concern about the other human being and the other situation, regardless of how easily pulled up this information is, or apparently is. But maybe it's just easier for a bot than an actual human being.
So, Tyler, actually, I do know something about this, and even before Elon's whole situation, generally because of the FAA rules, this information is available. Okay. Now, what Elon's done recently, so I don't know if that's what you're referring to. There is a program on a temporary basis that you can change the call letters of your plane, for like a 30-day, and you keep changing them every 30 days. That makes it a little bit harder for people to track it. And so he might have done that recently. So I don't know if that's what your bet is because you happen to know that. But generally speaking, you can track planes. Okay. I know people who have done it. Okay. Because it is, as Jennifer said, it's
Yeah,
out there.
sure. Just
Separate issue.
like, yeah.
public
Yeah,
info.
that when Pelosi's flight went to Taiwan, everybody's tracking that flight. You remember, we have online like more than almost 1 million people track. So see
Yeah,
the.
can I just point out that we've been
Yeah,
doing
thank
this
you.
since the war in Ukraine started. Like, just because it's Musk's plane, I mean, it's not really any difference. You can take that data, you can find that information off of Twitter. So even if he removes all real-time data flight paths of any aircraft at all, Bezos, his Zuckerberg, whatever it is, still going to be the data and information is still going to be out there, and that's how you've been able to use open source intelligence to track some of the flights in and out of Ukraine for humanitarian purposes. So I don't really see what all the hilarity about this is.
Then why doesn't somebody take Tyler's bet? I mean,
Exactly.
it would be
But
a
but
couple thousand
Exactly.
dollars.
but
Exactly. Why is nobody taking him up on the bet if
but
it's so
Ken
easy?
pointed out you can change
Wait,
the
what's the
name.
bet? I wasn't here. What's the bet? I'll have a bet. What is it?
Well, you can make it more difficult to track the data, which of course this does. But also the other side is that when you make such a big deal about free speech, then you complicate things when you then take action against public data.
But do you want to for celebrities? They have this. They can ask Google to erase their map image, right? So I think it's the same idea. Yeah, the main map they were like most make a pixel that yeah pixelate without a true image of their houses. So it's the same idea. You don't let the public to trace those kind of celebrity or important people that easily because they um in reality can say they live uh, have more value in a sense. So I think it's the all the tracking flight thing. Elon must have some way to make it hard to track. But if you let people, especially journalists, to get like that kind of information, I think there's still some point they need to understand it's not a fair point.
One of the things here also is that we have a system in Sweden called flightradar24.com you actually can take a peek at. And the thing is here that they also get in from all the flight nerds that actually are populating the parking lots around all the airports where they actually track planes leaving without having their squawk codes sent out. And these are the Swedish government, for example, because I've seen this quite closely. The Swedish government's airplanes, they don't squawk when they go up up into cruising altitude. When they hit 10,000 feet, then they turn on the squawk. But still, they're getting reported by flight radar of people on the ground that actually sense about, okay, now Swede Force 25 is leaving Stockholm Arlanda. You undone.
Yeah, so when we talked about this before, I said it's the people on the ground watching the planes. They're the ones really hard to keep the information quiet. But also, you've got the ADSB rules that you have a data system on planes. And if you're in controlled airspace, I believe, again, I'm not a US pilot, but I believe that the rule is that you have to have ADSB enabled in the US by FAA rules. So that means when you're in controlled airspace, you have to be broadcasting this. It goes out on a radio frequency that anybody can pick up. In fact, people are encouraged to pick up because the more people have ADSB receivers and push it into things like Flight Radar 24, the more comprehensive the service is. So plane takes off, goes into controlled airspace, got to transmit its position and various other bits of information by ADSB. Anybody can pick it up that's in range. In range means could be a hell of a long way away with a decent antenna, hundreds of miles. So yeah, I don't think there's any way around it.
There is.
Okay, what
And
is it?
Elon, if the FAA gives special exemptions, which Elon has.
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah.
And if
Tyler, those
people,
exemptions are temporary. They're not permanent, by the way.
they're exactly 1 month long, and he's
Yeah,
given
exactly.
recurring monthly exemptions.
Yeah.
Exactly, Ken. And the more anyone who bothers to research this for more than 10 minutes will figure this out. And then if
So
you
is
if you research
anyone
it for 20 minutes, you'll get into precisely how Sweeney used software to reconstruct based on very, very clever shit. He wrote some very, very clever scripts for how to figure out which jet that is completely anonymous is flying that might be Elon's, factor out all the other ones that aren't to try and reconstruct which one is his, the
So he did
anonymous jet that's
investigative
flying.
journalism. So then he did investigative journalism. Isn't that what you've been asking for?
Kind of.
I mean, but
But
why
it
would
ain't,
do
that
What's
ain't
that?
the
public.
difference, kind of or not? I mean,
What?
But
either
It
why
ain't
you
would
don't
public.
you
want these
do
guys
that?
It ain't
pressuring
public.
their
The difference
journalism.
is it ain't public and you can't find it.
I don't care if I can find it, Tyler. I don't care enough about this. I mean, there's so many underlying things here. Who gives a fuck? If they did investigative journalism and they outed his jet, big
He
fucking
gives
deal.
a
They go
fuck
dox him
because
all.
his life is
He's an
at stake.
asshole. He's, oh, give me a break.
Yeah,
And he's
and his
allowing all the
family.
Nazis on stage and all the
Yes.
other shit that are like going after everybody else. I mean, this is like talking out of six sides of his mouth.
No, but
Actually,
I
this
don't
is the
know if you
problem with
realize
humans.
what media is doing with they always say it's public people. People go crazy over this, and families nowadays are in danger because people are getting more and more radical and actually
And what
killing
about, yeah, all the
famous
shit that he said
people.
about his compliance guy? Now that guy had, I mean, seriously,
But
this
why
is
would you
not.
do that as journalists? Why would you waste your time on finding somebody's private location? What does it help? Does it help us to know better what is happening in the world? Does this help democracy or anything? Why? Like,
Well, if you
why does journalism do that? And what happened to Princess Diana is probably the most famous
Because
one
it
you can
sells.
imagine.
Because
Yeah,
it
but
well,
it's
there's
sells.
torture. It's torture publicly of a person. That those people are rich. They're still people. I mean, why don't they have any right to any privacy? That's ridiculous. Because why? I don't understand.
Katerina, when you
Like,
become the
well, here's a
famous
why.
person and wealthy, you do not have that right to privacy. It's unfortunate, but that's how it works.
Here's a why. He's got
yeah,
quite a
but
lot of money. You
why?
grab so Katerina. Here's a simple why. You grab him or his kids, and you ask him for money, or you kill them, and that's a why. It's a good money earner. He has the money. Some people are going to think like that. So I don't think like that, but I think like that enough to think like thinking like that. So that's just one of 1,000 reasons why he has billions of dollars that you could extort him out of if you knew where he was, and you could grab him or his family members. So there you go.
Yeah, but they are
It's
humans. I mean, it's just this jealousy that, oh, he's rich, he can deal with it, or his family. It's still torture
Because
to live like
Katerina,
that.
There's
I'll
a
So
give you the
why
distinction here. I
American
think
do we
there's a
want that?
distinction here. So, Musk is very wealthy, and unfortunately, the more wealth you have, unless you're incredibly good at, hiding behind, a lot of private places, which means you don't have much of a public life, don't have ability to just go to places you want, then you're going to be in the public eye, unfortunately. I agree with you that he shouldn't be targeted like this. No, but it does kind of, there is a bit of a correlation. The more money you have, the more likely you're going to be seen as someone who, people want to follow. And Musk isn't exactly the most quiet person. Come on, he's tweeting constantly and very active in the public eye. So it's inevitable, I think, that you're going to get some, should we say, destabilized or mentally, rather fanatical people who are like, well, or maybe if I can get hold of his child or him or something for financial reasons, as Ben says, or because they just are obsessed with him as a person, culty kind of behavior. So, unfortunately,
Yeah,
I don't
I
think it's really that
understand
possible.
why. I'm not asking, why people are doing what the motivation out of money is. I'm just saying, why would it help us as a public, as a democracy, to have journalists hunting down rich people and their kids? Like, why is that something we
the answer
need
is it
It
in
doesn't, but
doesn't
it
help.
democracy?
It
sells,
doesn't
Katerina.
help. And what's worse is the amount of people that are supporting that behavior out of their attachments to their ideologies. That's what's worse.
The culture, I think, because you think the Japanese journalist, for example, during pre, the late President Abe, during that period, actually, um, the Japanese journalists, I will say, they have this uh, this sense not to hunt down people. Even he is obviously the criminal, but you see they don't like harass their most of the journalists. Of course, some still go to harass his family. So the culture difference, I would say maybe in the U.S. you're a journalist. have this tendency to hunt down celebrities.
No, it's a really simple answer. If you look at, and I'll let Piotr speak to the UK, but I mean, there's a lot of it in the UK. If you look at the tabloids like the Sun, or you look at the National Enquirer, even though I mean that's probably less important now that we're online. But I mean, how many times before the internet did people grab the National Enquirer as you're walking out of a supermarket because of the salacious headlines? I mean, there's nothing highly intellectual in the National Enquirer, and Britain has their own tabloids. So that's exactly why, because there's money. There's the general public is interested in this, and they buy it.
Ken,
I
Ken,
mean,
that's really interesting that you bring that up because that is also one of the marketing reasons those magazines, those tabloids are placed at the checkout of the casa, of the cashier, because that is also why the candy is placed there. I mean, I've worked a lot on implementations for retail. That's literally like for food retail, where they sell those, like Inquirer, Sun, and all that. They put them normally by where you check out, and you're gonna like be in waiting in a line. So they purposely know from a neuromarketing perspective that that will be a great location for you to be like, oh my God, someone's sleeping with someone else. And like, all of a sudden it becomes like, the hottest. Then they just throw them in as an extra bonus
It's
into
a
their
it's an
cart.
impulse
So, are
buy.
you a
Yeah.
public
Yeah,
person
well,
as
Amy,
soon as
that's
you
a great point.
interact on social media and you write an article? Because if I would be that rich person, I would put private investigators 24 hours on people that just tweeted this, and journalists that do this, because there are other people having the same issue. I would put together organization and constantly surveil those journalists too from all these tabloids
Well, then it
and
sounds like you've
publish
got a
it,
great business
and
plan.
then
I would
and
go ahead
then
and do that.
let's see what happens, because it's a few people, there's billions of dollars money to be made, and a bunch of people don't have the right for privacy because they are rich. I understand that people are jealous, and it's annoying that some people can get so rich and others don't. But let's be honest, compared to other people, we are very rich. Let's say from some very poor country, people would have the right now to stalk you all day long, because compared to them, we are mega rich. Let's see what would happen. I mean, it's just a basic human right to have some privacy and some safety.
well, but
Well,
by the way,
first of
Katerina,
all,
there are a
I
lot of.
mean,
Let
first
me
of
make a
all,
point, Katerina. Here, there are a lot of rich people who don't have this issue because they avoid the limelight. Musk doesn't avoid the limelight. Nobody's following. For example, I mean, I think one of them just died, but no one was following the Koch brothers. Who are some of the richest people in the United States, major campaign contributors. Okay, because they didn't have a big social media presence. Okay, if you're Kim Kardashian and you're basically making a living off, the internet and the social media, then people follow you. You get paparazzi. I mean, and this is what I mean. That just it comes with
So
the territory. But there's
you're
plenty of wealthy people that you've never heard of. Okay, that nobody
Yep.
follows
just to
Yep.
around.
quote George
He's
Carlin.
cultivating that, Ken. He's definitely
To quote
cultivating
George
it.
Carlin, human rights are, well, they're not a right; they're a privilege. So what the right to privacy is not necessarily a right as much as we think it should be one. It's a privilege. And if people are going to have this obsessant behavior in following wealthier people, people that they idealize, people idealize Musk on Twitter now because of what he's done for what they think freedom of speech. But if you actually look at the reality, not much has massively changed. He's simply done a few things with a few different people and gotten himself into drama, which one fosters this inherent obsession in our minds, in our very primitive minds, about drama and toxicity and things around that nature. But actually, substantively, he has not engineered the much of the app significantly, but simply other than getting rid of loads of people. And if you see what he's doing in terms of, I mean, the guy is quite obviously got narcissistic tendencies. I mean, look at half the posts
Are you
about
a
him and
psychologist?
his posts. Say again.
Are you a psychologist?
Oh, he is. He's. I said narcissistic tendencies, Carl. That's the difference between narcissism. That's I use my words very carefully. So I have narcissistic tendencies. Everybody has narcissistic tendencies. But my point is that Musk is doing a lot of things that are not exactly great for himself. And so he's going to end up getting some people, and to Ken's point about the papers, these garbage pieces of journalism, which they're not journalism. None of these people have qualifications in journalism. They're just writing fanatical pieces to get, clicks and bitey, reactions. And that's why they're at the end of the queues of the post office or the supermarket, because it's an impulse buy. You see it and you're like, oh, I want that. And you take it and then you read it and you think, well, that was a waste of 20 quid or 20p, but it satisfies a certain emotional chemistry in your brain for some reason. But anyway.
Well, real quick,
Well, I've got an
somebody
interesting
had
tweet to
mentioned,
take up.
real quick, this is Robert. Someone had mentioned, well, maybe somebody should follow journalists. They are being followed. Let's just be clear. There are private eyes that do follow some of them. And in a couple of elections, sometimes they're outed for, especially the ones who try and act holier than thou. There are some politicians, especially major ones, that have outed them on their infidelities too. We just don't see as much of it. But I'd have to say the president before Biden outed a number of them. Yeah, we know he had a lot of sins, but we know he and his network were tracking these people too. So it'll be interesting to see if we have more highly wealthy people start outing the people, the journalists that are writing some of these things, and see how they feel about it too.
I don't
Again,
even consider
reminds
them as journalists. It's paparazzi tabloid bullshit.
Whatever they are.
Sorry. Yeah.
I just sketched and tweeted a little quadrant, which reminds me of what a famous golfer once told me. Oh, was he famous? No, he wasn't particularly famous. That was the point. But he made a lot of money from golf, but you would have never heard of his name, David Gilchrist, I think. And he said one thing they're better than being rich and famous is just being rich. But I thought about the other permutations and just tweeted it for fun.
Exactly.
Okay, tech. Here we go. Next up is we covered that. We covered that. Ink.
Just quickly, Tyler, can I just bring up this is something to notice. So today, Elon Musk is talking about a bill on Twitter. So he's
Yeah.
actually directly talking about something directly political, reading through the bill and actually bringing up points that other journalists have not. So it is good for me to see that information. And what's not good for people to see who are so indoctrinated is they get so upset by what he's doing and they get so worked up. And what he's actually doing is breaking the indoctrination of people's minds. So it's going to be uncomfortable for many people. But I just wanted to bring that up because nobody's really brought that up. They've either supported or hated what he's doing. But what he's actually trying to do is unindoctrinate the minds of everyone that's been consuming Twitter over the years, in my opinion.
I would agree. There, this new what is it, Ken? 1.9 trillion or some absurd amount of money that the U.S. is trying to pass, and they're trying to push in as kind of as usual on Capitol Hill, some unrelated potential casualties as a result of this, of like big tech regulations and whatnot.
Yeah, the big tech thing failed, by the way. That's not going to be in the bill.
Right, the government shutdown becomes part of this as
Well,
usual
that's
in the
what they were
U.S.
trying to avoid is the government shutdown. So this is the stopgap funding bill. But the tech reform bill, which actually had bipartisan support, could not get through into the bill because of really the tech lobbyists. I mean,
Right.
it's like because the problem is the rules in the U.S. Senate. If you get one senator to like object to something to agree, all of a sudden you can't pass something in 3 days. Okay, and they've got to pass this before Christmas. So
Yeah.
basically, if there's anything that any senators are going to like raise an objection to, you can kill it.
So it's a $1.7 trillion bill, and the point is that left leaning folks want it to pass, and right leaning folks. I mean, this is way overly simplifying the issue, but just from an American standpoint, just to really overly generalize it, the left wants it to pass and the right doesn't. Just to really overly simplify it.
Not on
And
the not on the tech part. There was actually
I know,
it doesn't cross on partisan lines on the tech part. So you have
I
you
know,
have Republicans and Democrats on both sides of that issue.
I know. I'm just trying to, for the non-Americans in the room, just to set the real
Well,
basic
I
AV.
understand that, but that's not an accurate reflection of American politics on that issue.
Yeah, but he's talking about an omnibus bill. So go on, Tyler.
My point is this: that the media, the left-leaning media, because they want this to pass, aren't really bringing a lot of attention to this bill because they just don't want to rock any boats. If the boats don't get rocked, if no one even knows this is going on, everyone's kind of lulled to sleep. This thing will likely pass. The what the left doesn't like what Elon's doing, and this is to Kyle's point, is Elon wants everyone to know, hey, you guys understand that the government's about to pass a $1.7 trillion bill that they might not be able to afford to pass. This could, and I think Elon feels it a public
But it's
service
not.
to.
It's not new spending. It's not new spending. It's not like Biden's other bills. This is not new spending. This is basically just the authorization to continue current spending to keep the
Yep,
government open. That's the
right,
basic part of the bill. This is
right.
not like an infrastructure bill. This is not new spending.
It might be worse than that. It is to pay for the things you've already spent.
Well,
So
yeah.
there is
Well,
some
the alternative is the default on the national debt. So
exactly, which is shooting yourself in the foot. So I think the problem really is that all of these matters are really complex, and then you just sort of show up and shine a light on a corner of it. That's not really exposing anything. That's just
Well,
reminding everybody that it's all complex. And it
I
does
like
not
that.
lend itself to a soundbite is the problem.
Right.
That's the problem.
Yeah. Well, here's the point I'm trying to make, which I think Kyle was also trying to make, that Elon, by using his own Twitter account to do a poll of how do you feel about this, and then by saying, regardless of how you feel about it, contact your politicians to let them know how you feel about it, is a really interesting exercise of trying to retrain people to think of Twitter as the place where the conversation, the actual legitimate town squareness element of Twitter, which is unique. It's a beautiful, incredible thing. And rather than have the politics be steered by media creating overly trite sound bites that then misinform people, that then lead to misinformation, disinformation, bad decisions, and whatnot. We need a forum where we can debate these things from both sides. And that's why he's going out of his way, as Kyle kind of nicely positioned, to bring up an issue that he normally would have no business bringing up. But except for the fact that he is bringing it up because Twitter, in his mind, is the perfect place, the best place as of now, to enable the types of conversations that need to happen around these kinds of things. And so for that, I think I agree with Kyle that I completely applaud what he's doing because we need desperately a town square where experts from all sides can debate these things out. And that will replace the mainstream media who, unfortunately, in 2022, 2023, have become overly soundbite based, clickbait based, and that's leading to the misinformation, disinformation, and bad decision making paradigm that we have begun the downward spiral of. And he's trying to bail us out of that. And that's partly why he felt it necessary to buy Twitter. And that's what he says if you look closely into what he's saying about why he bought it. Because he feels like this is uh, fundamental to having a functional democracy, is that we're able to actually have conversations about these issues like
uh,
we do in this room, by
Okay,
the way.
but Tyler, so Elon just put up a poll, okay, yes or no, whether people
Yeah,
like the okay, that thing, right? It's a 4,000 page bill. I guarantee you,
yeah,
he hasn't read it. No one's read it, and so
fair enough.
you're asking people to vote on something that they don't even, most of Congress doesn't know what they're voting on. But in the broad sense, it's really important to realize most of this is not new spending, okay, and really it's a question of do you want to default on the national debt, or do you want to shut down the government? Okay, I mean, because this is where it is. So
I like your framing of that. I like everything you just said.
yeah.
I think that's a really good way to framing to go into this debate.
Yeah, I think the big
Question.
issue is when Congress slips in these little bullshit things in there that kind of makes it a little complex. But Ken, you're spot on. But also, I mean, the debt ceiling is never ever being addressed in all this stuff. So
A question is that putting a poll on Twitter, how representative is that? Is that really representative of the U.S. population? Even if we stick to the U.S. population, not globally. So if we are trying to get a data or a sense of where the pulse of the people is really Twitter, because I think there was some survey that came out, I don't know, months ago or a year ago, that said that only few people are actually the engagement generators on Twitter.
Yeah, I'd say it's
Messi, I
just
need.
to get people talking, to get people discussing about the topics, in a as much of a non-biased way as
So need to draw another
other
little
issues
diagram. Oh,
in
sorry.
the last. Oh, sorry.
No, no,
I
it's my
tried
fault,
having.
Carl. It's my reception.
Okay, I tried having conversations with my friends over the last 3 years, and I noticed that they would only go so in depth, and pretty much that threshold of their depth was basically what they could cite off of a CNN or Fox News article. And so I think the result of the poll is less important than the having people discuss these issues on a public platform that's kind of like a town hall square.
I think there's an interesting comment here. So I think the physicist Sean Carroll put it interestingly in one of his podcast episodes. It used to be the case that Twitter was for linking and not thinking. And maybe this is an effort to change that from just a place where you're just shit talking and just saying one liners to actually having a more nuanced conversation. So the long form is perhaps one effort in that direction. So I welcome the chance to see if that's possible. Although I have some skepticism, I'm still hopeful.
Okay.
I'll do.
Next story. Go
Tyler,
ahead.
just on that, just to amplify Messi's point, I will just do a quick tweet in a second of a diagram of if you think about all the other histories, right? So you've got he has two people who are on Twitter, ignoring the cohort, massive cohort of people who aren't, who follow Musk, ignoring all the people who don't, who responded to that survey, ignoring all the people who don't. Now that's the small subset of people that you're sampling. So I think if you were to look at all the other branches of that tree, you'd realize that, yeah, that'll answer something about how representative it is. I think that's something about what Messi was trying to get to there. And I'll tweet a diagram. It's just such a
Okay.
small proportion of the people you could have asked.
Okay. BBC. The UK's Intellectual Property Office says that sharing password for online streaming services breaks civil and criminal law. So think of Netflix as the first one that comes to mind. Sharing passwords for online services, like any kind of SaaS app that you're using or whatever, because the spirit of that is one user account, one email, one password, one user. And if you're sharing that, essentially it's theft, right? That's digital theft of a sort, because and it might even be written in the user agreement that it's for one user only or whatever. And so the UK's Intellectual Property Office says that sharing passwords for online streaming services, such as Netflix, is against the law according to government agency. Now, knowing that, how long before said services might start trying to collect or punishing or what have you
So let
at
me
the
let me
music?
tell you how
Wait,
this will
wait.
go.
Can they go hit up like Dashlane and like LastPass because they could just go into just a few of those. Those have like sharing capabilities, right? And can they say, hey, we want to like subpoena all this stuff and like then get full access to who's sharing with what? Because that just
And
creates like a very weird
even more, they could
benefit.
go into
In
they could go
principle, they
directly to any chat
Right.
app. They could subpoena chat apps and be like, we know this user has this password. Show us every communication where they shared that password.
can't do that with LastPass or one password at least. I don't know about others. Because it is encrypted at our end, and LastPass themselves cannot get access, so there's nobody else can ask for access. Now, you know that depends on the endpoint. It depends on a whole bunch of assumptions, but I think it's a reasonable working assumption that your password management company cannot get to your passwords, even if they're forced compelled to. But if the government has access, or anybody has access to our endpoints, your computer, which you might as well presume they do, Pegasus, etc., then obviously that's a way around it. But I think it would be perfectly valid for LastPass to turn around and say
Does
we
this only
can't.
applies in the
Can't.
UK, Ben?
What,
Yeah.
the
Well,
rule? Yeah, I
the
think so.
UK is the first to say this out loud. So if they turn this into a very clear law, then that might empower some SaaS companies to seek for some sort of violations of their user agreements or whatever.
But you have to also realize that a lot of passwords are just being shared, people to people privately. They're not on these services, and then you get to the same issue that happened with, what happened with music in the 1990s. I mean, do you? I mean, and as you know, Tyler, the recording industry, initially when they tried to pick off a couple of teenagers, and this is where it is, and sue the teenagers and sue the parents for downloading music, and the political optics of that were terrible. So eventually what you have to do is you have to shut down something like Napster, which they did, right, eventually. Okay, but you have to go after a service to the extent of it's a service, but you're not going to go after individual users, because quite frankly, no government has the resources, okay, to go after every single individual who's sharing a password, or downloading copyrighted music, or a copyrighted movie. I mean, it's when you think about all the other problems we have in society, is that really where you want to use your resources, other than maybe going after the main services that are doing it on scale? um
It
Yeah,
depends on
but
their
Yeah,
architecture.
yeah, but
It
they
well,
could
depends on
just
the
say they
like I
could just
said.
do
If
like
it, they wouldn't waste their time with ones that are encrypted, as Ben's saying, or peer to peer, which is why the Pirate Bay still exists today. They would focus on platforms that architecturally can be searched and subpoenaed and queried in this kind of a way. I don't. You could use your imagination as to which ones they would start with on their pyramid of low hanging fruit of who they would go after.
well,
what I
and
think this
also
Tyler,
is
is
more
this,
of
are
a
we
this.
talking,
I think
you guys, are we talking about this in a vacuum? Because it's from what you read from the headline, and which we need to understand a little bit better, is that password sharing and doing that is a violation of civil and criminal law. If I own a SaaS company and I issue a user license and I say you can have 5 people use this license, then there's no law violation there. It's my product and I can tell you how to use it. So it's a violation of the terms of service. That's where it says all this. And I'm sure Netflix says one user, one viewer or something. We know that people are doing beyond that. But what's the underlying case here? Why are they saying it's a violation of law? I mean, we're talking about it in a vacuum here.
We're not. You missed the important sentences that we included, which was
Awesome. Love to hear it.
well, you can rewind the tape and listen to it. The words were, if the UK takes this one step further and creates a law that would empower SaaS companies that could then, in this theoretical example, we're doing a theoretical assumption, in the event that the UK turns this into a law, that SaaS companies could then seek damages based on violations of users their terms of agreement to the user. Then how would they go? We're just trying to investigate by what means would they go about trying to seek infringers.
Well,
That's
I'm
the
just trying
the
to get
same the
back
same
to if
way.
you said it is a violation of civil and criminal law if they made
no,
it a law. So we're not there yet. So we're saying it could be a
no,
violation of law.
right. I said if in the event that the UK does make this a law, how are they going to go about collecting damages? Is the experiment, the thought experiment we're on at the moment?
Yeah,
Well,
but
if
if you
they
actually
did
read the
something
headline
similar,
in the story, Tyler, that story says that they've already determined that it's a violation of UK copyright law. That's the sentence in the story.
Right, but
well,
do they list
well,
what the punishment is? Because until there's a punishment listed, I don't know that they'll waste their time.
it depends on. I think it depends. Like, okay, in the U.S. as an example, right? It depends on what they say when it comes to attorneys' fees, right? Like, so as an example, with labor law, they have a clause in there when it comes to attorneys' fees, shall pay, right? The attorneys' fees, and it's like treble, or I mean, for the
Yeah,
overtime
You're
fee.
two, you're 2 steps down the line. That's if there's a private right of action, then there's attorney's fees. So that's a whole different. That's a whole different.
But if they're this one, I'm saying
There's not. They're
that's
not
what's
offering a private right of action here. I mean, you don't know what there are. They're saying it's a violation of copyright. Back it out to what they're getting at here. So Ken, I think you said they say it could be a violation of copyright by sharing these And
Well, I think
But if they
realize if you
if
read the story, but I mean, I think it's very important to realize, that we're talking about the UK and slight variations, in law. I mean, and there are significant variations in law from country to country. Nobody should transpose this to the United States or Canada or anywhere else. We're just talking about the UK. So unless somebody's a lawyer in the UK on this issue, probably no one's really qualified to opine on this because this is really just unique to the United Kingdom at this point.
But aren't we
No,
just
but
having
I
what
mean,
if
no,
it really
conversations?
comes down to lawyers' fees,
stay
though.
focused. No, we're
It
not.
comes down
Don't
to
get
the.
confused. We're making a wild assumption that this isn't going to happen. The odds of this happening are very minimal. But the experiment is the question is a technological question, not a legal question. We're just starting an argument with assume that the UK makes a law and it's punishable by death if people share passwords. Now, how would the platforms, the SaaS companies, go about trying to figure out who's sharing the passwords? That's a technical question. Technically, how are they going to do that? Not legally, how are they going to do it? Technically, how are they going to go find those people? That's the question. Based on the assumption that some magical law is passed in the United Kingdom that means people get burned in a pile of fire with their dogs and their cats. That's the law that we're assuming gets made. You're going to get burned to death with your dogs and your cats. Okay, great. How are they going to find them?
It's
Don't get
only it,
confused about if they're actually going to pass that fucking stupid law that we're imagining.
it just depends on the attorney. I mean, if there's an incentive for that, then we'll figure out what to do. If there's not, it's
We can't
not
hear you,
there's time
Maha.
for it.
You're in
Well,
and out.
The
oh,
time
I don't know
again.
if can y'all hear me.
You're a bit in and out
If
there,
y'all can
Jason.
hear me, if I was saying it depends on the attorney. If there's an incentive for the attorney's fees, and there's a way for them to do it, then they'll do it. If there's not, then
Right. Until there's a clear benefit to seeking them out, meaning there's a clear financial benefit to doing this, then they're not going to do it. That's why I said unless there's an actual punishment or a clearly written fine per user that makes it worth their time to do it, they're not going to do it, even if it is illegal. So anyway, that's you're trying to define this imaginary law that's hasn't been written and likely never will get written, so it doesn't really matter. Anyway, so the next one is Anchor, which I've never heard of, admits its security cameras live view feature on its web portal has a security flaw, but fails to address why anyone can view unencrypted streams. Yeah, cameras are hackable. Okay, that's newsflash.
No, no, no.
Next is
Just a little detail there. It's actually a little bit more nuanced because you can have the link, and and for you to stream your stuff to your account, that's fine. But why is there no security feature? So if anyone actually has the specific address for my cameras, they can stream it. Why was it designed poorly from the onset? And the company seems to not be addressing that at all. First, they said that it was fine. It was supposed to work that way, and now they're kind of slowly backtracking and perhaps changing their position as the gravity of the situation sets in for the rest of us. So even so far as somebody like Linus from Tech Tips, from Linus Tech Tips, he basically severed his relationship with Anchor because of this. So that was an advertising relationship there and just a sponsor or whatever. And they no longer want anything to do with that because of the concerns there. So it's definitely a little bit more to the story, but we'll see more as it develops in the coming weeks.
we covered that one. Raspberry Pi CEO says 2023 will be a recovery year for the company, and customers should not expect a Raspberry Pi 5 due to ongoing supply chain issues with you know who. Twitter says community notes will require contributors to achieve a quote unquote rating impact of 5 or more by rating enough notes before they can write notes themselves. So you're going to have to rate notes before you can write notes. This is one of Elon's grand schemes, which all credit, this was an existing scheme of the former Twitter regime that Elon was very fond of, and it didn't quite get off the ground. And Elon very likes this very much. It's essentially the human crowdsourcing the curation of tweets because he believes fundamentally that the moderation of Twitter should not be done by a secret cabal of folks in the way that it was done in the last regime. That it should be far more transparent and open and proud and done in a way that is open to community, like as exemplified by his kind of community votes that he's doing. It probably will require you to be a Twitter Blue paid member to do this, though, as the votes themselves, it was now revealed publicly yesterday that you're going to have to be a paid Twitter Blue member to participate in votes, and you'll probably have to be a Twitter paid Blue member to participate in the community notes too, because he wants people who have known identities that are humans, that they can be held accountable for their actions, essentially. So Palantir signs but anyway, once the community notes really starts rolling out globally in full, this will be a new layer to social media moderation, the likes of which we haven't really seen before, which I'm very curious to see how it plays out. And Elon's incredibly excited about it, as are many other folks. Anyway, Palantir signs a 3-year, 75 million British pound deal with the UK's Defence Ministry, providing software to prompt real-time military actions and predict potential results. Palantir has signed a 3-year, $91 million deal with the UK's Ministry of Defence to make predictions based on software.
Yeah, doesn't
And
doesn't this completely change democracy? Like we're moving into something that's different than democracy with all this AI prediction stuff and the power of
here's the problem.
politicians.
Here,
You
notice this. Here's the important detail to pick up here. That the UK Defence Ministry ostensibly will be using Palantir's analysis to make decisions in real time. So you're making software-based decisions, right? This used to be an exclusively human endeavor, making military decisions based on intelligence. Now that intelligence is going through algorithms, right? Because there's more variables, more sources of information than humans can process. And so you're using a private company to process aggregate all of this information to help you make decisions based on its recommendations and its predictions. Could
know,
then Palantir, if there's a some kind of um, superpower that is controlling Palantir, or maybe not. Maybe Palantir has its own geopolitical motives that would not be in the aligned interests of the UK Defence Ministry. Could
well,
Palantir then suggest that they launch the nuclear missile at Beijing?
well, I mean, okay. So another way to look at this as an example, right, is if you look at Chat GPT right now. What was interesting was if you went to trends.google.com and you put Chat GPT in there as the search term, and you looked at the analytics, the number one metro that is using, as far as saturation, that's using Chat GPT is actually the District of Columbia. So for some reason, all the politicians are using Chat GPT 3, right? So then Chat GPT 3, as you could see it live right now, they are censoring it or controlling it. So there are humans that are controlling the output of what Chat GPT 3 is. Same thing with Palantir. So then, if these politicians are going to start using this stuff, really the power is now centralized based on what the people are inputting and still censoring the AI.
Here's Palantir's tweet about the deal. Palantir is proud to support the rapid modernization of the UK armed forces. This partnership with the Defence HQ, meaning the UK Defence Ministry, will help enable world-leading operational capability for one of the US's closest allies. Okay, as long as you trust Palantir's analysis and algorithms, all's good. It's all good. It's all gravy. You're gonna get much better results than you would have done on your own. With your pencils and your crayons, and whatever abacus you were using to make your decisions. So, a whole bunch of fundraising announcements, and China sets new data guidelines imposing a strict review of data processing, cross-border data transfers, and M&A involving foreign capital. So again, more details emerging in the great divorce between China and the West. Ukrainian vice prime minister says more than 10,000 more Starlink terminals will arrive in coming months, and as of now, all financial issues have been resolved.
Oh, by the way, Zelensky is on his way to U.S. to Washington.
Yes, because he needs a big sloppy wet kiss from the Pentagon to keep uh, things going, and he wants to make sure that the details of his request don't get leaked, and you got to do that kind of begging. I say this affectionately. I hope he gets what he's asking for, but I imagine he needs a lot because Russia's escalating a lot, and given the current trends, this ain't good. What's going on? And he needs new, bigger, stronger. And I said at this here's my personal take on this. I'm happy to be very transparent about it. At this point, why not launch hypersonic missiles at Moscow from Kyiv? Given what the Kremlin's doing to Ukraine at the moment, and carpet bombing and phosphorus bombs and the whole deal, they're barely holding anything back other than nukes at this point, and it's civilians. So given what's happening from the Kremlin, why not? What do you have to lose if you're Kiev by not launching or not reciprocating in kind? What do you have to lose? You have nothing to lose. They're already trying to annihilate you. They're
I
in
would also
full
just add that
annihilation. Okay,
the
Peter, go.
defense minister Shoigu made a statement uh, not too long ago today that basically um, the Russian military will begin formalizing new units on the western border with Finland if they were to join Ukraine. And I think that this is a illustration of Russia trying to do some military and diplomatic signaling.
You meant to join
Australia.
NATO, right? That's not to support the specific to NATO that they shouldn't join NATO. That was the thing that they're talking about.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, we've seen the Finns and the Russians go up against one another in the Winter War and the continuation war of the 40s. But I think it's just interesting that they do this on, let's keep in mind, today's the 300th day of the war. And as I said in another space, Putin was giving some speeches or commentary, at least, to some security personnel in the Kremlin as well today. So the fact you've got Zelensky coming to the US, it's all very, the optics, and Putin sort of in the Kremlin on his own, and sort of it doesn't look great for Russia from that spectacle side. So there's a lot going on here at the moment, which may or may not.
Well,
I'm curious. This article that's been on Top Shelf by Katerina is Zelensky on his way to Washington in U.S. military jet to meet Biden, right? I'm just curious. How about those countries that Russia last time used to, I mean, try to invade? Do those leaders get such treatment from the U.S.? Special
give an
Um,
example.
treatment?
could you provide? Sorry, could you clarify? I'm not sure I understood your question.
No, because okay, Zelensky is on U.S. military jet, right? So apparently this is supposed to be a U.S. initiated business trip. So I'm just curious because this is not the first time that Putin tried to invade another country, right? I mean, territories. Did the leaders of those countries who were kind of territorially invaded, uh, did they get that kind of special treatment from US?
So
Well,
should
but
Not to say, not Cheryl,
when
not to
Who are
say
Georgia
you
what
was
talking
Sam,
about?
when Georgia was
not.
invaded, did the president of Georgia get similar treatment? You
I
know
think
that's a good question.
I think it depends whether that country is sandwiched between NATO and Russia directly.
Yeah, basically anyone on the other side of the Iron Curtain, like if you were to think about Slovakia, for instance, they would generally get catered to. It'd be in the best interest of America to kind of cater to those countries that are close by that were on the other side of the Iron Curtain. And yeah, this is seems to be more intense than previous conflicts, and there's a lot going on, right? Like I think someone from Russia just visited China, and so that there is is something to pay attention to as well. And I'm sure that people in America that are in charge of the decision making are paying attention to all of the facets of the conflict, cause and effect around the world.
Well,
And
let's.
so,
Oh, go. I'm sorry, Kyle.
oh, no worries. That's good. That's a good point to start,
Hey,
Patrick.
just real quick, I think it's honorable that America has them on a U.S. plane. Let's be clear. If you look at what happened to the Polish leadership who were on a Russian-made plane, not saying the Russians did anything, but they were going back to a part of Belarus to honor. I don't know. I think it was about 8 to 10,000 officers that were supposedly killed by the Nazis, but found out was killed by USSR, and they end up dying. The I think the top four people plus military leaders who were all on the same flight. So for the U.S. to put Zelensky on a U.S. plane is definitely a very secure thing, especially since he's coming here to speak versus him being on someone else's plane.
Okay. Senator, hang on, I just missed one. U.S. prosecutors say, oh, by the way, Russia did say, because they know Zelensky is going to go ask for bigger, stronger, more support and everything. And so Russia had made a quickie announcement that if Zelensky gets his hands on, some super heavy duty U.S. military missiles, we'll take that as the U.S. entering the conflict, and anything's up for grabs as a sort of threat to prevent Biden from giving that to Zelensky. Anyway, the U.S. prosecutors say two men conspired with Russian hackers to tamper with JFK Airport's taxi queuing software, allegedly letting drivers cut the line for a fee. Okay. Senator Warren's, that's Elizabeth Warren's, Digital Asset Anti-Money Laundering Act would be a disaster for privacy and civil liberties by effectively surveilling all blockchain users. What a surprise that the government's going to want to bear hug to death and surveil. And they love the blockchain as long as we can see everything that's going on and we can control that bitch up and down, left and right, front to back. Then great, let's bring the digitization to the people. The EU opens up skip that. OpenAI open sources something called Point E, a machine learning system that generates and displays a 3D object from a text prompt. So now you put in a little text prompt and it makes a 3D object out of the prompt. Not a 2D image like DALL-E 2. This is a three-dimensional object. This is the beginnings of the holodeck, where you're going to say, put me in a VR environment. I want to be at Disneyland with all of my deceased relatives. And I want to talk with them and give them, chat GPT level intelligence based on all of their former correspondences and vocabulary and vernacular and all of that. And it's coming. We're not going to stop until we get there. And it's coming fast. That's going to easily happen in our lifetime. I would even say it's going to happen in the next 10 years.
Maybe
So
that's
next
why
is,
Bob Iger went back to Disney.
yeah, could be. TikTok begins telling users why a video was in their feed, such as the likes and shares and comment searches, followed accounts, or whatever. They're trying to explain why the content's there because they don't want you to assume it's just because President Xi wants you to see that. So anyway, those are the big boring headlines. 4 minutes past 12. Did anyone have a tweet since we met last time that they want to make sure that we get into?
Oh yeah, the OpenAI one, but Cheryl just posted it on top, so there it is.
Open it. Yeah, we just covered that.
Did you
Yeah,
cover the
it's
debate?
so sorry. There's just one thing about OpenAI. It's not that open. So you would hope that the premise of this was that it democratizes AI and lets us all use it. But as far as I can see, I can't download the model, the untrained model or the trained model, and run it on my own hardware. So people have seen dollar signs. I think Microsoft is spending roughly $1 billion on Azure services to run it. Is that right? But I can't anyway. OpenAI, it's not very open. I can't download the untrained model and let it crawl my own data on the web, and I can't download the trained model and provide the compute power myself. So again,
It's open to
not
the
very
web.
open.
It's open to the public, as in using it. That's what I thought it
Yeah,
meant.
It
Ben,
is
Yeah,
I
yeah,
think
included,
we,
Ben.
Ben, I think
yeah,
they're having they are giving, I imagine they're offering APIs, but they charge for it.
yeah, but
Yeah,
it's
but
still it's still a black box then.
yeah, but in
So
essence, basically everybody's training it, right? Like everybody's loading data, everybody's putting stuff in, and it's not available for us to like get the advantage of that. So we're basically all working for API, open API as we do all the prompts and put in data into it. That's what Ben's saying.
no, I'm not. Well, I'm not saying that. That may or may not be the case. I don't know that it does learn from us as we talk to it actually at the moment. I don't know that. I just don't. I can't confirm or deny that. What I'm saying is that it's a black box. And I thought the spirit of OpenAI. I'd like to read their mission statement. Well, I should read their mission statement and come back to you. But this isn't very open. I don't know how much compute it requires. But even if I had to wait 10 minutes from my powerful home computer to run the model, I would like to be able to download the train model. It won't be that big. It'll be maybe it's big, maybe it's terabytes. But I still like to be able to download it and run it privately and train it on data I choose and so forth if it was really open, and it doesn't appear to be. API is very different. That's just getting remote access to a black box. It's the fact that it's a black box. I will look at their I'll just look at their mission statement and comment again later.
Cool.
Actually,
I'd
Ben,
like to
what you
unite
brought
some
up
of
is
these.
something I think is going to come in the future. Because if you were to think about the intellectual property that some people might be giving away, different businesses, if they want to use, will need that, right? Like they'll need to download that model onto their own server to protect their own data and work with it to protect their intellectual property. So that might be coming in the future.
Yeah,
All right.
but there's a lot of financial incentive. When, as I say, when Microsoft had to put $1 billion in there, and they're either just throwing it at the wind for the sake of it, but whoever signed that $1 billion check has got some business case behind that. By the way, OpenAI's mission is to, in simple terms, ensure that highly autonomous systems outperform humans at most economically valuable work, and that it benefits all humanity. Anyway, I'll read more about it, but it's just interesting to note how closed box it is and how susceptible this potentially is to commercialization, and a runaway effect
And
of
I think they've already
how people
publicized,
use it.
but it's going to be commercialized. I mean, that's their intent. It's in training right now, and just because they have the word "open" in it doesn't mean it's going to be, fully open source without restrictions, free code they're giving away. They've never. I don't think they've ever said that. They're making it available to people. Is their intent? They are absolutely a commercial company, and it's expected that it's going to be behind a paywall or some sort of fees in the near future.
Ben, the other thing I was going to share is that not that everything this individual has touched has been successful, but this is backed by Reid Hoffman, and his general thesis over the last several years has been investing in companies, tech for good. We've been told that before, but what I've seen from Reid, completely separate of Microsoft. I mean, I really think he's trying to be the voice for reason and good, one of many, and he is obviously behind OpenAI. Just for broader context.
No, it's
Yeah, but
fantastic. It's
having
here.
said
It's yeah.
Sorry, I've
so,
got a little bit of a cold today.
Go ahead. I've got nothing to add value wise.
All
Hey,
right.
Matt, thank you. And we have heard that before, and it's ridiculous. So, commercializing something this powerful, just the word commercialization is not the best word to use because it's got to
Yeah.
have a blended, you know, number of things that you're trying to optimize, right? Hey, I'm going to take this and take it into the legal field. I'm a commercial endeavor, and then see what happens to certain lawyers, or go just pick your industry. So it's very tenuous. It's very suspect. If just the whole mission statement. We need, hopefully 2023 we will see more legs of the stool to make it just a more wiser deployment. I'll just use the word wise. Because there's
Well,
there's multiple aspects to optimize.
yeah, I'm sorry, David. Yeah, I mean, we've been duped, right? We've been duped. That's why we're having these, healthy debates and dialogues on these calls. We feel, not we, but I kind of feel like, the collective we on this call, we've been duped, right? We've been duped by, crypto. We've been duped by, other forms of privacy invasion, data manipulation. So, we're going to question, we're going to squint pretty hard at the next, several things technologies that come out. But I think the path is pretty clear because with Open AI and GPT, again, look, I'm the first to be excited about the future, but also to be a skeptic about the future, i.e. metaverse, right? The hype cycle reality. But if you think about where Reid is spending his time in terms of triangulating points of influence for Washington, and we can't even trust Washington these days because oftentimes they're always playing catch up in the tech game. There is a push to regulate AI, and we've talked about the good, the bad, the indifferent. But I think we've learned from Napster file sharing, we've learned from social media turning into social commerce, which is happening literally. Like if you start monitoring your news feed, you're seeing more commerce offers coming through your social feed. So I think that prediction from Tyler, we're seeing in real time. Will it catch up fast enough? I don't know. This GPT stuff is really scary, especially when you're. I think 2 weeks ago, a young man wrote a children's book in 2 weeks, right, bypassing the editors, the publishers. So we have to be natural born skeptics and make sure the technology doesn't get faster and further ahead than our ability to process this at humans. But just like was stated by Tyler, in his earlier discussions with Elon around, this is an iterative process, hopefully for good, turning the town square into a conduit for Washington, making sure that we get, verified user identity. So I'm optimistic, but I'm also a skeptic in the future.
But like all you got to do is look. I mean, the strangest thing that popped out to me when I went to the, anybody could do this. You go to trends, trends.google.com, and put in chat GPT as a search term. You scroll down, you'll see and do last 30 days, right? You change it
Mm-hmm.
last 30 days. You'll see that the number one as far as saturation, right? Like per 100 people, how many people are using it is District of Columbia, which is extremely strange, right? Like, because this is a technology, right? So
Mm-hmm.
beats California, it beats everybody else. Like, so DC is all over Chat GPT as the top users, per capita in
Yep.
in the world right now. So it's like, what are they doing with it? Is the question.
I totally
A
agree.
couple of things that come out of Chris's rooms, which are phenomenal. Some of the most jaw-dropping rooms on this subject that Clubhouse has had. A couple of techniques. I think the question is, what's like getting back to my wise, grandparent wisdom on how to deploy this, or quote unquote commercialize it. In your conversations with people, uh, take the word watermarking and some kind of meta information. And those specifically, when you're watermarking this effectively, which who knows how we can do that effectively, but that's kind of the framework. When you're watermarking it, as this is replacing human work, those who make those decisions can at least have represented to them whether this is from the machine. The other thing with regards to oh dear Lord, no coffee yet. The meta is important because we are already failing. Thank you, Google, on how fake news, fake science, fake everything is getting into our minds because we rely too much on the quote unquote Google it for knowledge acquisition. So this meta thing we're talking about is, where did this news? What's the at the simplest terms? Where does this information come from? Is it from something that's just fake or wrong? So there are a few things like this that we need to cultivate, to really steer it in ways that minimize. I'll even say minimize, because it's going to be destructive in some ways. It's going to be great in others, but we don't need another doggone thing just taking us off the cliff, right? So those are just a few thoughts as you start to discuss this more with people.
One observation I have from this room today and also from Chris's room is that because I have been publicly writing to the internet since its inception, and I post weekly now, and several of my books are available in digital format, when I die, I will be able to be reconstructed in AI with pretty good fidelity. So my granddaughter can put on a headset and go to Disneyland and walk around with me, or we can go to any of the 50 countries I've visited in my life and we can discuss philosophy, art, biophysical economics, climate predictions, gardening, or any other subject about in the course of my life.
I want that AI. I
Yeah,
want
I've
to
actually
drag
been
it out,
meaning
work around with it.
to. Sorry, Ben.
That's cool. I was just saying I want that AI too, because I've got lots of questions for Albert.
What was okay? So I've been hanging out in chat in Chris's room and asked a bunch of questions, but like and what we talked about earlier here with the Palantir deal, right? Okay, I think this stuff is pretty phenomenal. It's like, as far as like all the creativity it could do. So one of the cool things was it'll like hallucinate entire environments and hallucinate, meaning just recreate like web browsers and then even a Chrome extension. You could just basically say, hey, make a new screen splitter better. And it'll just punch out the code. And you got, so now you just get product left and right now from this thing, of code base that you could use. I asked him if it could do specifically then. He's like, yep, this is what it could do. So that's cool, right? But back to that Palantir thing earlier, right? And hanging out in Chris's room too. It's still heavily modified. There are human beings that are observing the output of this AI, like what answer does it give, and then human beings are modifying the output, like saying, "Oh, we don't like this, so we're going to modify what the output is." All right. So, in that case, if when we have our politicians and our defense departments that are using these tools, right, to make decisions, okay, there's got to be some type of disclosure, right? And it's, in order for us as a public to know what's being modified for the output. And then of course they're going to come in and say, well, this is IP and it's our trade secrets and stuff like that, and that's going to be like a push pull thing. But you can't have if we don't know what the modifications are, right, then that means the politicians are not really in control anymore. We just lost democracy, because just whoever controls the AI modifications is really in control of what the outputs are.
Okay, so the people that are in charge of the decision making in countries are probably more aware of the technology than we're anticipating. I know some seem like dinosaurs and not paying attention, but I'm sure that like DARPA or some other government agencies have worked on this as well simultaneously and haven't released it to the public. So I guess when we think about that, we got to think about what is accessible to the common person or citizen and what is accessible to a government official in a secret agency. They're probably two different access points or points of access to the information. Something that Albert brought up is huge, and it really, thinking about grief and attachment, the loss of a loved one. It seems like a nice. So in London, there's a station there that it actually has an old voice recording that's stuck around before it became digitized. And the reason for this recording is a lady kept on going to the train station to hear the voice of her husband. He was on the recording, he passed away, and somebody at the train station noticed that she kept on attending just to listen to the voice of her husband. Um, then the tube station decided to keep that recording in that particular station alone, just for that woman, and it became something that other people heard about, would talk about, and it was a story. Now, the attachment to her husband was so intense that she would come back to that train station every day and sit for hours to listen to that voice. And so, thinking about the philosophical, psychological implications of what Albert just brought up is actually quite significant. And it would be good that, to have some psychologists that are looking into the implications of this technology, and especially with grief, about an attachment, about what Albert is talking about, because I could I could see that going the other way. That could leave a person in perpetual attachment to a loved one and never actually getting through the grieving process.
I think that's a really important point, Carl. Thanks for bringing it up. Go ahead.
Okay, 5 tweets here worth sharing. Katerina found one. Turning cells into zombies, scientists identify the secret that allowed a parasite to infect 30% of humans. Is this the cat parasite? It sounds like it, because that's 30%. A large portion of people on the planet are infected with the parasite Toxoplasma. Yes, that is the cat parasite. Now a study headed by scientists at Stockholm University demonstrate what? Demonstrates how this tiny parasite spreads so successfully throughout the body, for example, to the brain. The parasite infects human immune cells and hijacks their identity. The research was recently published The various roles of the immune cells in the body are very strictly regulated. How toxoplasma infects so many people and animal species and spreads so quickly has long been a mystery to scientists. We have now discovered a protein that the parasite uses to reprogram the immune system.
You mean The Walking
There you
Dead?
go. Zombies. Zombies in your
Zombies,
body.
yeah.
But
According to the research, the parasite injects the protein into the immune cell's nucleus, changing the cell's identity. Toxoplasma has been described as converting immune cells into Trojan horses or wandering zombies that spread the parasite. It is astonishing that the parasite succeeds in hijacking the identity of the immune cells in such a clever way. We believe the findings can explain why toxoplasma spreads so efficiently in the body when it infects humans. Toxoplasmosis is probably the most common parasitic infection in humans globally. It affects mainly many animal species, including our pets. The WHO has estimated that at least 30% of the world's human population is a carrier of the parasite. Studies indicate that 15 to 20% of the Swedish population carry the parasite, the vast majority without knowing it. The incidence is higher in several other European countries. Felines, not just domesticated cats, have a special place in the life cycle of Toxoplasma. It is the only in the cat's intestine that sexual reproduction takes place. In other hosts, for example, humans, dogs, or birds, reproduction takes place by parasite dividing. It's spread through food and contact with cats. The parasite causes a disease called toxoplasmosis. When a person is infected for the first time, mild flu-like symptoms occur that can resemble a cold or a flu. After the first infection phase, the parasite transitions to a sleeping stage in the brain and begins a chronic silent infection that can last for decades or for life. The chronic infection usually causes no symptoms in healthy individuals. It can, however, cause a life-threatening brain infection in people with a weakened immune system and can be dangerous to the fetus during pregnancy. Eye infections can occur in otherwise healthy individuals.
is this the same thing or something different? We all, I think a lot of us have heard like, okay, if you're a pregnant woman, should not be around cats. Is this the same thing or is this something new? Is that like, or is this an addition to cats? Creating more problems.
It's the same thing that you've heard about.
So it causes encephalitis, which is inflammation of the brain. There are several causes, including viral infection, autoimmune inflammation, uh, insect bites, and others. Sometimes there's no known cause. Encephalitis,
It's the same
inflammation.
that's in CTE, the chronic traumatic encephalopathy from head injuries in football. So, yeah, you don't want swelling pretty much anywhere in the body, especially in the brain. Is John here?
What's interesting about this is that like dogs have helped humanity throughout the years. Like we've kind of domesticated a wolf and bred dogs, and they've had their purposes. They've helped us. Whereas it seems like cats have just evolved to manipulate human beings. Um, their meow mimics the sound of a crying baby so well. Um, and it is very, very interesting. I thought I'd bring that
No,
in.
they actually started to be domesticated to get rid of rats.
Yeah, controlling rodent populations, Pied Piper stuff.
With
Okay,
grain storage, that became a big issue once we
can
got
this be
agriculture.
can this be
Are
detected?
you talking about dogs or cats?
Cats.
Cats.
Wait, so
Okay, yeah.
question. So a lot of people have cats. So can this be
So the
detected?
meow mimics crying baby.
Okay, so since a lot of people have
Yeah, but
cats, right?
the sound that any animal makes the sound of any crying baby. I mean, they only tested cats, but every animal makes a similar sound at a similar frequency.
Ruff, 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 ruff.
Okay, so we got cats. I'm just curious, right? So can this thing be detected through a test? And B, is there treatment?
Let's find out. That's the Google search question. Test. Here
I'm
it
providing
is.
information in the back channel.
Can a blood test detect it? A diagnosis is based on blood tests. So yes.
There,
I know of that information that you're providing, and what they failed to take into account is that they only tested the frequency of animal cries, and the fact is that wild animals also make cries at the same frequency, and they're making the argument that through the domestication process, the frequency of cat cries changed to make us want to tend to them, but failing to take into account that completely wild animals also make cries at the same frequency.
Three signs or
Right, but
symptoms of being
frequencies don't sound like. I'll just drop it.
okay. Three symptoms include blurred vision, confusion, and loss of coordination. These need immediate medical care, particularly if you have a weakened immune system. It says.
There has been some controversy about some studies suggesting that it's higher in people with schizophrenia. So some people have, thought maybe it was linked to that illness, but it's controversial.
So it says people become infected in several ways: eating food, drinking water, or accidentally swallowing soil that has been contaminated with infected cat feces. Eating raw or undercooked meat from animals, especially pigs, lamb, and wild game that it might have been infected. There you go. Okay, next up from Katerina. I really like this one. A 28-year-old buys a cruise ship apartment because it's less than renting and he could see the world. All expenses paid, life for $50,000 a year. So he spends $50,000 a year to live on a cruise ship full time, including all that's meals, medical, everything.
Is the cruise sailing or dock at some
Yes,
harbor? So what will be the address?
no address.
Maybe the address of where the cruise ship is registered.
And do they give you unlimited Wi-Fi at high speed?
What's your residency? How does it work with legal shit? If something
You could ask me
happens,
that question.
you know?
I spent 3 years, 1 month in each country, 36 months, 36 different cities, one back to back. So for 3 years, I had no residence.
But
So
you are American, right? So I
But
guess you are probably ultimately has an origin in US, like an address
you
in US.
can, there are services that will receive paper mail for you and
Yes.
digitize it and send it to you as an email.
Yes.
but
But if
what
you want
about
to
if you get
renew your
into an
passport, where do
altercation?
you put your address as?
Say again?
When you renew your passport, you need an address, right?
Yeah, so what you could do,
Yes.
I actually I do this. I'm digital nomad, right? And so I'm float around. You can go to UPS. If you go to the UPS store, you could actually get a physical address
Yeah,
at the
yeah.
UPS store. So
Yeah,
you could
yeah.
get a physical box at the UPS store.
Yeah, yeah, I know virtual address. But the thing is, Tyler, do the embassy, I mean, as in US government need you to have an address before they renew your
But they don't
passport?
verify the address.
Yeah.
You can put whatever you want.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay. Next up, Japan to speed up approval of AI for diagnostic image units. The lengthy process appears to have crucial. Yeah. Of course, AI is coming to the medical sphere. That's an old story. Carbon-eating blocks ingest 8 tons of CO2 per day, says the company. A Netherlands company called Masterblock has engineered an eco-friendly building material from steel slag left over from the steel industry that eats 8 tons of CO2, carbon dioxide per day. Buildings that eat CO2. A German institute just broke the solar cell efficiency record by 32.5%. Advances in solar energy research mean that photovoltaic designs are becoming more efficient and can produce more power in limited areas. And Ben and I are incredibly excited in ways that the rest of you probably aren't, because um, the more watts that we can squeeze out of every inch of solar panel is very good news, especially if it's not at a severe increase in cost. Because the main game is watts per dollar.
Yeah,
Uh,
exactly. Not necessarily, depending unless you're space constrained. If you're space constrained,
right,
it's watts per square meter, which is what
right.
this will be talking about, by the way. And by the way, when they say it's a 32% increase, what they mean is you're going, for example, from 25 to 33, not you're going from 25 to 50 something, right? So it's 25% efficiency times 1.33 or whatever their improvement was. It's a 33% increase on 25%, or whatever the increase was. So just to be
Right.
clear, you're not going up
So,
to 50 odd. And yeah, and some people
correct.
don't care. It's often better just to buy cheaper older panels, if you're not space constrained, and not spend the money on the expensive new ones. Solar panels are going to get a lot cheaper. They're not going to get a lot more efficient over time.
But how much the grid pays you for the energy that you produce and push back is being cut back as well. If
Squat,
you're something,
squat, dude. They don't.
so
They
it's
do
being
not.
reduced by 60%, the government subsidy. So it'll be interesting to see how the industry responds.
Oh, by the
Well,
way, substantially important. Tesla just announced their own civil scale energy subscription service. So they're your own power provider. I believe it's in Texas. So you can pay Tesla to be your power provider in a city in Texas because they'll have enough people using power walls in that area where they'll build some kind of load balancing system and they'll feed it into they'll make a physical grid to connect a community of houses based on solar panels and the charging stations around that town and everything else.
Oh,
I mean,
I
what's
didn't
good?
realize
What's
I was
good?
off mic.
What the good news on this solar stuff is that right now, when I did a lot of research on this, 39% of new homes are they're using solar, which is pretty cool. But the energy companies are adapting, and what they're doing is they're charging these connection fees. So even though you don't really need their service, right? And then they say that, oh well, you need it for like 911 and the fire department for some reason, even though there's other ways around it. But they're still, so even though you put solar on your roof, right? You're still a lot of these places are monopolies, and as they install solar, they'll just start raising up the connection fees. That's the problem with we're still not completely free from them, and you have to have you can't really go off grid. I've investigated this and started working to work with Ed now, who's on here too, and I was very surprised at how we really don't have freedoms in the U.S. You can't really go off grid. They still got you. They're gonna you have connection fees. They're gonna always be there.
Yes, but you can have a connection to the grid that comes to a master switch in your kitchen that you can turn off.
Yeah, but I guess what I'm saying is like the connection fees are like something they could charge, and they're still
Sure.
they could do whatever they
Oh,
want. They could they'll charge
okay. So
25, 30, 40
assume
bucks.
I understand. Assuming that you draw no power from the city grid, there still might be charges, even if you're drawing 0 watts per month or whatever. Yeah, they might still
Yeah,
bill you
base fee.
just for the connection that they require. Sure, that's true.
Yeah, so
You can be you can
you can't.
be, you can be off grid in the sense that you don't use the city grid. You don't actually draw power from them.
Yeah, but you
They
don't have
might
no.
make it difficult,
Yeah, but you
and they
can't.
might make it very very difficult to install solar on your premises. I don't know that I'm sure there's some places that actually outlaw it, which is
Yes,
that's
that's
really
right.
fucked up.
Yeah,
Yeah.
what's sad is you can't, like, if you wanted to put solar and battery and be completely disconnected, you can't do that. They don't allow you to do that. You have to by law be connected to the grid.
How many
Those are
states
no.
is that in, Mayor?
Wait, Mauer. You need to understand. Those are two totally separate things. You can. Is it illegal to buy batteries? Is it illegal to buy inverters? Is it illegal to buy panels? Because those are the only three things you need.
Oh no,
I don't think it's
yeah,
illegal.
yeah. You could still not draw power from them, right? Like,
Right. Right.
but they still require you. Like, it's like, well, why do if I'm not drawing power
Understand?
from you, why do I need to connect to you, right? Like, you know what I'm saying? But you can't just disconnect. They don't allow you to totally disconnect.
You
Or
well, they wouldn't know unless they
just
come
don't
in
pay
and
your
look in
bill.
your kitchen.
Try not paying your bill, then you'll get disconnected. They can't have it both ways. They can't tell you you're not allowed to disconnect.
That's an interesting
So
point.
what do you do when you don't pay your bill? They're going to disconnect you. So job done. So just don't pay your bill.
Oh, they'll
I
they'll
mean,
come
half
after you
of that
because
isn't true. There's all these areas that are off grid. There's whole islands nearby me that are off grid. I mean, who's stopping them?
It depends on the
Yeah.
We're talking about municipality rules. Yeah.
Yeah, we don't want to confuse a couple of things. Well, you probably aren't, Mayor, because you know this. That this is the US. But talking about the UK, you absolutely can just go off grid. You just go off grid. Simple. What you cannot do is connect power generating equipment that could be connected to the grid, like
To
you
the
know,
grid.
to the grid without special approval to do so, because they're worried
Right.
about backfeeding into the grid.
And,
It's a safety concern. It needs to be approved.
yes, and nor should they. Yeah.
And you can, but you can if you do it with a mains transfer switch, which is I think what you were alluding
Right.
to, Tyler, where you have a
Yeah.
switch that says my house is either you switch the live and the neutral across. I'm either on grid at the
Yep.
moment or I'm off grid. Anybody can go buy a generator. By the way, at the moment in the UK, the crazy thing is you can generate power slightly cheaper by buying diesel and burning it in a diesel generator than it costs you to buy daytime
That's fucked up.
electricity, which is fucked up to use a
That's
technical term,
crazy.
especially given that
That's
then
crazy.
the carbon intensity of doing that is 3x what it would be if you bought it even from the dirtiest form of grid power. But that's the
Well,
situation we're in at the moment. But you can absolutely just go and get a generator and then by extension, or inverters, batteries, and so forth. Because in the UK, you said the only three things you need to power yourself are panels, inverter chargers, and what else did you say?
you need. You don't technically
Batteries.
need batteries unless you want to have power at
And
night. Yeah.
batteries, yeah. But in the UK, that's not really true because for like 3 to 6 months of the year, you've got no chance on solar.
Right.
You're going to have a generator as well. Um,
Right.
yeah, so it's only going back to the very beginning of the article. The great thing about panels getting more efficient is it pushes the price of others down because there are people out there, just like the people who buy the top end graphics cards, always want the best thing. There are people out there who want the best thing without necessarily thinking about it. If you're not space constrained, just buy the cheapest, just buy, as Tyler said, pounds per watt, and don't worry about whether it's a 200-watt panel or a 500-watt panel. Doesn't matter. But people want to buy the best, so people will buy that, and then and it'll push the price of everything else down. So that's the biggest. That's the biggest thing that's so great about that. It's also great when you're space constrained on a boat, a canal boat,
Right.
RV, whatever, a house with a smaller roof or any roof really. So yeah.
You know, it'd be good to actually have Edna do a room, Ben, maybe with you, right, on this, because another thing that was weird, you know, I mean, when I spent a week with her in El Paso, like and I actually went around knocking doors, you know, to sell solar, because you know I want to get into this arena. It's a great arena to get into. I think it's good stuff. Um, but like the amount of weird stuff, like for example, if you're like the fifth house to if like five houses are connected to the then they're going to charge the fifth house a ton of money, because then there's transformer fees, right? So the energy companies are not making it easy to install solar. And then another thing they do is, it's interesting, is they have these they'll adjust prices, and so these solar companies, what they do is they travel, they move around from place to place, the sales reps, right? And it's crazy money too, man. You got like 19-year-olds making $15,000-$20,000 a month just setting appointments. The closers are making like $30,000-$40,000 a month selling this stuff. It's a heyday. And the they move around, right? So they'll sit there, and then when the energy companies sit there basically getting hit with new solar installs, they'll go lower the prices, right? So it's like this cat and mouse game with the salespeople, the solar salespeople, and the local energy companies. They'll sit there, they'll lower the price, so it doesn't make sense for them to install solar, and then they leave, and then they'll raise the price. So there's this whole, like, you know, fight going down between the solar people.
Mayor, it's also
Yeah,
worth
that's
noting
a
though
good point.
oh, sorry, go ahead. I've done
Oh,
most
no
of the
worries,
talking today.
Ben. I was just going to say, like, the it's interesting, right? Depending on where a person lives, there are going to be different laws based upon like the area, the local region that they live in, and then there are also going to be different, I guess, stipulations or specifications implemented by the company that runs or controls the power grid. So it is not as simple as some would like it to be, and these are kind of loopholes that will have to be kind of looked at from a regional perspective, um, where someone's actually living and what those bylaws are, and how those energy companies handle business.
Yeah, and in
It is.
Arizona, where we have sun 360 days of the year, I ordered solar um, 6 months ago. Maybe I signed a contract for it maybe 6 months ago, maybe more, and it's still not on my roof because the energy company and the city all have their little, piece of the action that they have to take. So you have to wait for the energy company to sign off and then the city to permit it.
So I still don't have it, and
And,
it's
There's
and
re-
a
That's
couple
the
of
that's the
things.
primary that's the primary limiter, by the way. What's interesting that the permitting and what's really strange is like so this is the whole solar bill. It's actually really makes a lot of sense to put solar on your house. You're gonna get a big tax credit, a 30% tax credit, and then like a 1 to 2% loan, and then you could wrap up HVAC and roof and chunk in a bunch of stuff and call it an energy plan and like pretty much redo a lot of your house and get 30% off is what it kind of comes down to, and you can that in the form of a tax credit, not a deduction right away at the end of the year. But what also happens is it's all limited to permit. It's all permitting. Like what's really stopping the solar expansion is the permit process, just like Dr. Francis said. So all the solar salespeople will go travel around based on energy prices in the region, and then also the permitting rules. And then what happens is you come in, and then all these solar people come in, boom, and then they're gonna hit an area, and they like canvas this stuff, right? Sell a bunch of it, and then now the permits go from a few days to a month or 2 months, and then they, when depending on how quick you could do permits is what's determining this. So it's a very like fluid market that's but permitting is the primary thing. And what's interesting is that Republican areas are actually run fiscally better, and the permitting processes are quicker than Democratic areas, right? Predominantly where the permitting process takes a whole lot longer, and there's all these rules, and so it's like it's an interesting dynamic between Democrats and Republicans, even though it's like a really a Democrat push thing, but it's implemented more in Republican run areas. And yeah, the permitting is where it's at. If you got fast permitting, you're gonna have fast solar coming.
yep. And
There's three.
must have slow permitting, but there's no way to know that, and there's no way that the solar people can predict it for you because they don't know.
Well,
Three.
it depends on like if they canvas, right? If they come in, and even if there's if there's fast permitting, so the permitting also goes in waves, right? Because once the word gets out that hey, this area has faster permitting, then the solar sales people will go there, and they'll move around because there's so much money to be made in this, right? Like I mean, you got 19 or 20-year-old kids, 30, making between 15 to 30, $40,000 a month selling this stuff, and these guys are going out buying all types of crazy cars and stuff. There's it's a big boom. It's a big boom right now.
I would
That's
just
true. Got
caution
it.
people also to watch for a number of the scams that have been out there. Just make sure whoever you work with is either tied to the Better Business Bureau, you name it, because a number of people across the country have been left holding the bag, and you can look online to see some of the things that have happened.
Yeah,
Well,
this is
there's
some
one woman
incredible
in our
scam going on.
community who I know who is her unique selling proposition is that she's the green realtor, and she is a rep for a solar company. So that's who I bought it from. So I know the company and I know the person, and it still
Got
doesn't matter.
While we're talking about practical advice, I've got, I guess, four things I've thought of now. One is inspired by what Dr. Francine has said. When you get sold on the benefits and the payoff period of solar, you really want to make sure that contract or factor in how long it could be before it's actually installed. You'll have this installed in a month and it'll start paying off and blah, blah, blah. How about if it takes 2 years to get the permit? So just factor that in if you're buying. The uncertainty, maybe even contract it in if you can. Another thought would be if the people are buying, there's people earning this much in the supply chain, then there's too many middlemen. I would encourage you to consider. I mean, I personally would get up on the roof and fit it myself, but if you don't want to go that far, I'd at least consider project managing it yourself and learning about it. You can strip the middlemen out. At the end of the day, the panels are less than 50p a watt. Bit more installed, but don't need to be too much. Be careful about all these things like end phase and solar edge and all these things that are supposed to improve shading that add 50% plus to the cost of the panels. They not necessary, except for in situations where you have particularly strange shading requirements, because panels already can deal with shading with bypass diodes that are built into all solar panels. So don't fall for that plus 50% on those things. Microinverters and solar charge controllers that may or may not be needed. What else to say? There was a few other things. There's good practical reasons why they have these permitting, and you have to look. If you were going and working for the electricity grid, and you think you've turned off a section of the grid, and you're working on the overhead lines, you don't want a whole bunch of monkeys feeding power back into the grid in a way that you don't know about. That's a safety concern. And also, you need to think about what happens on the worst case when the sun's shining like mad, but for some reason there's some sports event on and everyone's away from home and nobody's using their power. And so everybody's pushing back into the grids. Now all the transformers start blowing up. So all the stuff does have to be certified so that it doesn't screw the grid up, because you can screw the grid up by backfeeding. Anyway, I'm going to shut up for a bit.
It's a dog eat dog thing too, like so that like these guys are going in and like they're raiding the permit offices, right? So they'll go in, the salespeople go into the permit offices and figure out, okay, somebody's got a solar permit, then they'll go to that address and try to give them a lower price, right? And like come in and swoop the contract. So they sit there and they don't file the permit till they got all the paperwork lined up, right? The banks in this are making a killing, right? So the amount of money that's spent on this, the banks are eating up about 20, even though they're charging the interest, they're charging also to do the deal about 25% is going to the bank just to finance these deals. So like that's also a great opportunity. Like if more banks could get into the lower that lower that fee, then it'll decrease the cost for consumers. But right now, yeah, it's an absolute heyday, and it's going to be like that for a while. And what's interesting is only about 1% of commercial, so nobody's cracked the commercial side yet and it's everybody's waiting for the creative financing to come in on the residential side. There's a process, it's working, people are rolling over to solar, and 39% of new homes are putting in solar, and they're flipping fast. But on the commercial side, it's only like 1%. So there's still there's a huge opportunity there if the banking industry can get in and figure out the financing issues there, then commercial could really.
Okay, we lost an hour. Two more tweets. To- with this one, I've been waiting for this headline to present itself. Again, we knew this all along, and now it's finally in black and white. From MSN, Toyota's CEO isn't fully sold on electric cars, and he says a silent majority is on his side. Toyota boss has long said the electric cars aren't the only way forward in the auto industry. He said a silent majority in the auto business agrees with him. Lots of car companies are racing to electrify their lineups. Toyota isn't moving as quickly. Yeah, no shit, they're not moving quickly. Despite the fact that the Prius, which was a hybrid,
Yes.
sold like goddamn hotcakes.
Just wanted to
Yeah, I
say
was going to
that.
say that. Yeah, the Prius is the seminal step in that direction, but hybrids make no freaking sense. So, yeah, I don't know what they're thinking about.
Car companies from GM to Volkswagen are making big promises about eliminating combustion engines and electrifying their lineups, but Toyota, the world's biggest car maker, isn't quite sold on electric vehicles. Yeah, we've noticed. And it thinks it's not alone. Speaking to reporters recently, Toyota president said that most of the auto industry doesn't think EVs are the only way forward. Yeah, it doesn't have to be the only way forward. He's talking like a politician. This guy should run for political office.
This sounds like Boohoo. We're struggling to get our electric
That's
side working properly. It's not
that
the only.
that's
Yeah, what a weird campaign.
No, I
that
think
that's
that
how the old school
Not really,
Japanese
because
business people are like.
yeah, but he had a huge advantage in that Tesla's Gigafactory 1 in Reno is a partnership with Panasonic. The Japanese were actually the ones who actually knew how to make the batteries.
but Toyota has traditionally been looking at various modes. Hybrid is not categorized for them the same as electric, and also hydrogen fuel has been something they've looked at, and he's right.
Massively.
They're not alone in thinking that there are other ways of doing it, and that fully electric has trade-offs that may not be desirable for them. So I don't think he's completely wrong. I think the jury's a little bit out.
I don't think it's very far out. I mean, hydrogen is so inefficient. The whole premise of this is a bit like blockchains that aren't Bitcoin. The whole premise of electric cars is that it's energy efficient, 4x more energy efficient per mile than gas. So that why would you go to hydrogen? Because you're back to worse than gasoline. Because
Re
a
recharging
hydrogen,
time.
when the last time I charged my car, well, I've had a car 3 years and I've only charged it once away from home. I mean,
So you don't drive often. You've got the tube right by you, don't you?
no, I don't have a tube. No, no, no. I'm out in the countryside. I have to drive everywhere, and I never recharge my car. I start every day with a full battery. Why would you charge out? And when I do charge out, it charges too quickly because you put it on a supercharger. You walk across the lot into the place to grab a coffee. You sit down to drink your coffee, and the Tesla app is saying, "Hey, mate, your charge is finished. You need to get off the charger." And I'm like, "Fuck that! I want to finish my coffee." So it charges too quick. Is the complaint from a natural user? So next objection about electric cars: hydrogen makes no fucking
Somebody in
sense.
America might feel differently. You have a different transportation structure
We don't.
that's
I
been
have
put
no
into
other
place over
choice here,
time. No,
Kyle.
but
Kyle,
you
I
have
have
a
no other choice
yes,
where I live.
but you're talking from a UK perspective. There's an American perspective to consider as well as all the other countries around the world, and they have different transportation system grids, right? So, what works for you isn't exactly the same as what's going to work with for somebody. Like I saw IO just do a thing. He lives in Canada. So if you were to think about the commuting distance and also the weather, it's a lot different in Canada than it is in the UK, and same in America.
Kyle, that's all very generic, mate. But look, firstly, I was talking about hydrogen. Hydrogen, at the car end, it's no better than a gas car. And then at the production end, you can't make hydrogen without losing at least 20-30% of the energy. So it's just straight up less efficient, A to B. It's volumetrically awful. It takes up a lot of space. The only thing it's got going for it is it's super light. It has an energy density, a specific energy rather, energy per mass, but really good. Yeah, fantastic for like planes and things potentially, if you can find somewhere to put it because it's bulky as hell. But for cars, it makes no energetic sense whatsoever. In the UK, where I live, my experience is I do not have buses, I do not have trains, I do not have any option. I do not go around anywhere any other way except for car. I never recharge away from home except for an extremely long trip. And it was -7 centigrade recently, whatever that is in your money. And no problem at all. Dream to live with. You hit a button on an app, the thing's defrosted before you get to the car. It drives just the same. Loses a tiny bit of range, insignificant. No problems at all. So, I mean, I'm not sure. There's a lot of FUD out there. It
There's
just,
a bigger issue for Toyota here, which is countries are now banning combustion engines. So Toyota better come up with their alternative options rather quickly, or they're going to find themselves incapable of selling cars at all in countries that are banning combustion engine cars.
Hey, speaking of this power stuff, I know you guys may have covered this earlier. Hey, Ben, and Ben would find it. This new fusion starter thing that popped up. I know IO shared it with me a few days ago. I don't know. I wouldn't be surprised you guys already covered it, but what's the kind of short version on?
we're
Uh,
nowhere near, we're nowhere near fusion.
If the lasers were more efficient, like they
No,
have to be
listen,
70
guys,
times more efficient.
guys, look. Fusion. Okay. The sun is pretty good at fusion, right? It's been doing it a while. It's not bad at it. Do you know how many watts per cubic meter the sun produces on average? Not on average, in the bit that it's fusing. Anyone want to guess? So a cubic meter is you stand with your arms out, right, and you spin round, and that's, your personal space is a cubic meter, a little bit more. In that amount of space, how much fucking power do you think the sun produces for each cubic meter? Anyone want to guess without Googling it? Because it shocked the hell out of me when I heard it. The answer is 20 watts. Right? If you do the average, just go to Wolfram Alpha and go solar luminosity divided by solar volume, you'll get 12 watts or less than that. Much less than that, actually. I think it's point something of a watt. But most of the sun isn't fusing. So the bits of the sun that are fusing are only producing 20 watts per cubic meter. What does this tell me? It tells you that a typical nuclear power station is maybe a gigawatt, right? I think that's right, 1,000 megawatt, gigawatt nuclear power station. So how many cubic meters are you going to need of plasma? So, okay, step one, assumption. Assume that we can only do as well as the sun for now at fusion, density-wise, right, in our plasma. These plasmas they're fucking around with in these research labs are microscopic. If you're going to need, let's just assume we're only as efficient as the sun, then we need a cubic meter for every 20 freaking watts. Okay? So when you want 1 billion watts to compete with the nuclear power station, you divide that by 20, you're going to need 50,000 cubic meters. What is that? A football stadium? Several football stadiums? I don't know. Just think about the volumetric. So that's the plasma, right? But a nuclear power station, a fission station, the actual bit that's getting hot is not much bigger than a larger living room. And how big's the plant as a whole? A nuclear power plant as a whole, by the time you put the containment around that and all the other ancillaries, is so big that you can produce as much peak power by just putting a solar farm where the nuclear power station is, and you get the same peak power, not the same average power, but you get the same peak power in somewhere with good sunlight. That's how
But
big a nuclear
but
power plant needs to
how
be.
about
So
the rare earth materials we need for all of
yeah, well,
that
that's
and solar
absolutely.
trash,
Sure,
all the
sure. Different,
trash we
different, different.
produce?
Look, Katrina, I'm not making a value judgment about solar. I'm just stating a fact about the energy density of a nuclear power station, a fission station, right?
Well, there's
So
a
if
new trend on making micro nuclear power stations,
sure,
and one
that's
of the
fission though.
people that are building the first one, Marvel, they are actually
Hang on,
coming to my club
can
to
I finish?
talk
Hang
about
on,
it.
Katrina, can I finish my point, please? You just completely interrupted me. So you're talking about, I'm not making value judgments on solar, and I'm not talking about fission here, which is what you're talking about with the micronuclear. What Maya asked was about fusion. The sun. If we can't do better than the sun in terms of volumetric efficiency, then we can only produce 20 watts per cubic meter in the actual plasma, right? That's a simple fact that's easy for anybody to verify. That means you're going to need something the size of a fucking football stadium of plasma to produce the same amount of power as a nuclear power station. That's just the plasma. Most of the volume of all of the things they're looking at the moment is a massive amount of infrastructure immediately around the plasma, i.e., the toroidal magnets and all the rest of it. I don't know how big they would have to be, but the answer is many dozens, if not hundreds, of football stadiums worth of volume. And that's before, and now in the fission example, the plasma is the football stadium is the only the size of a larger room. The building that's in is the dozens or hundreds of football stadiums is the toroidal, donut or whatever format they have. And then you've still got the rest of it. Think how big, as I said, the reason I mentioned how big an entire nuclear power plant is and everything ancillary to it all around and the cooling and the water and the substations it's a huge area it takes up. Imagine how big a fusion station would have to be to produce the same power as a fission station. So we're going to have to make our fusion thousands of times more efficient than the sun. Otherwise, it's a complete non-starter from a volumetric energy density point of view alone. And there's no way around that. It's just simple physics.
I got to end it there.